Hello, good morning. Welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Chris Atwell, Chair of the Planning Committee. Limited public seating has been made available. However, this meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. The public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Assemble by Queen Victoria statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust's fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting is being live streamed and everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making a deputation. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when you're finished, otherwise the camera will remain on you. If there is any voting, please can members keep their hands raised clearly until the number of votes has been stated. Okay, let's make some introductions. If we start with members, Councillor Hunt, if I could ask you to start.
Yes, good morning everybody. Good morning Chair. I'm Councillor Lee Hunt and I'm a full member of the Planning Committee.
Thank you, Lee. Nice to see you.
Good morning Chair. John Smith, Councillor for Eastern Craneswater Ward.
Good morning, John.
Good morning Chair. Mary Valley for Cosham and Wimmering.
Good morning, Mary.
Gerald Van Jackson, Councillor for Milton Ward.
Thank you, Gerald. Thank you, Peter. I don't know why I didn't quite catch that from your microphone. I don't know if anybody else did. Is it?
Yeah. Peter Candlish, Eastern Craneswater Councillor.
Thank you, Peter.
Good morning. Asghar Shah, Councillor for Cosham and Wimmering.
Good morning. Nice to see you, Shaw.
Raymond Dent, Councillor for Copner and Anchorage Park.
Good morning, Raymond. Thank you very much. Officers? Where should we start? Julie?
Good morning all, I'm Juliette Gill, I'm the Principal Planning Solicitor. I'm here to advise the committee.
Thank you, Juliette.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. I'm Simon Turner, Interim Head of Development Management.
Good morning, Simon.
Karen Martin, Democratic Services.
Thank you, Karen. And if I could ask those giving a deputation this morning, those intending to speak, to introduce themselves.
Councillor Benedict Swan for Copner and Anchorage Park Ward.
Good morning, Ben. Thank you.
Simon Hill, and I'm the applicant for 27 Queens Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. If you could shout a bit louder into the... That's it. Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You're going to have to, I think,
No.
put your loudest voice on when you give your deputation, I think. Ah, I don't know. That's okay. We'll get there. Thank you.
John State, resident of St Chad's Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. State. I think we've got the same thing there. You're going to have to just shout when you give your deputation so we can all hear you.
Councillor Russell Simpson, Hilty Ward.
Thank you, Russell.
Karen Wells, agent for Applecore, representing 6 of the applications on the agenda today.
Thank you, Karen.
Hello. Teacher and resident of 25 Queens Road.
Thank you very much.
Morning. Mike Russell at Bewley Road.
Thank you very much. We'll get to you as soon as we can. That's everybody that's intending to speak today, I think. Thank you. Members, declarations of interests. Any? No? Okay. Apologies. No apologies, but I know Councillor Shah needs to leave at 12:30 or thereabouts. Mary?
Apologies from Councillor Smythe, Judith Smythe.
Thank you, Mary.
Chair, Councillor Hannah Brent isn't here, so we probably need to record her apologies for not being present.
All right, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, pages 5 to 14 in the pack. Are members content? Agreed. And Councillor Hunt will sign those after the meeting as he chaired the previous planning committee. Okay, well, we'll get to today's substantive business, but I think before members, I've changed the agenda. I'm sorry, this happens, doesn't it? So we'll do it as we go through, if that's all right, if you can forgive me. But before we get to the planning applications, I know, Simon, you want to give us an update around St James' inquiry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very briefly to make sure members were aware, if you hadn't already, it hadn't already come to your attention, the planning applications for listed building consent and housing development, conversion of the listed buildings and new housing at St James's Hospital. The appeal decision arrived about a week ago. That was for a maximum or total of 209 dwellings. So this was an appeal against non-determination by the City Council. The City Council expressed its concerns around certain defined matters in order for the inspector to take those into account, including local residents. The appeals were allowed, that is, planning permission has been granted and listed building consent has been granted. In very brief summary, the inspector did give weight and consideration, of course, but weight to the principal concerns that the planning committee had, for example, around the loss of trees and the loss of some open space. But in a very simple summary, those matters, although found to be harmful to a degree, were outweighed by the very significant benefits of 209 dwellings being provided to meet the city's housing need and the benefits of reusing and securing the long-term use of listed buildings.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a very sad decision from the government inspector to overrule this committee. Their view of the benefit of the city of having yet more houses pushed on us is not in line with what local residents say. The loss of over 50 protected trees to this development is outrageous, and the loss of open space, and to a development that offered no affordable housing, so there is no benefit to local residents at all. I'm really sorry that the government inspector has overruled this committee yet again. And that people in my patch in Milton will have to cope with the effect of this government inspector putting more houses, more traffic onto our roads, and I think it's a very retrograde decision. Can I ask, there was a concern that if we oppose this, the council might be hit with having to pay costs for the developer's lawyers, out of taxpayers' money. Can I ask, were costs awarded against the council?
Costs were not sought by the applicant in the first place, and neither did the inspector decide to take it upon himself to award costs unilaterally.
Excellent. I think that's really helpful to remember. Sometimes when we're advised we're likely to be hit with very big legal costs, that sometimes that advice might be scaring us into doing things that we shouldn't be doing.
On that, Mr. Chair, just to say that you're dead right. We shouldn't be scared by when people say to us, you're going to have terrible costs. What we should do is try to do the right thing.
And well done to everybody involved in the inquiry as well. Okay, all right. So apologies for the playing fast and loose with the agenda, but we're going to start with St Chad's, which is item 5.
So, Chair, can you give us a list of which order you're going to do them in?
This will sound like a game of bingo here. So eyes down looking. So the first application is number 5, St Chad's, followed by number 6, Queen's Road. Number 4, Bewley. It does sound like bingo, doesn't it?
Number 4, which is that?
Bewley Road. Item 7, Oriel. 9, Northern Parade. 8.
Hold on.
Belgravia.
Yeah.
10, Magdala. And number 11. Fine. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, you're welcome. Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So we have deputations and some supplementary matters as well. So make sure I pick those up in a moment. 61 St Chad's Avenue, proposed change of use from a C3 dwelling house to a 7-person house in multiple occupation, an HMO. So up in the northwest part of the city, London Road is away to the west. This end of St Chad's Road is, as you can see, a cul-de-sac terminating in the health facility just next door, which has its car park accessed off the end of the road. And then we have the school just further to the east than the health facility on Battenberg Avenue, Cliffdale Primary Academy. This is the application site with the yellow dot on it, so it's an end terrace. That driveway is next doors. With respect to the HMO data count, which for people new to this sort of application is the policy we have concerning community balance and the 10% threshold, which indicates whether or not a community may be considered to be imbalanced or not imbalanced, with the 10% being the tipping point. It's a 50-metre radius drawn out from the centre of the application property, so it can pick up properties in surrounding streets because their gardens or indeed the backs of the properties are within the 50-metre radius. In this instance, there are currently no known HMO properties within the 50-metre radius, and if this application is approved, the one will lead to a percentage of 1.96, so below the 10% policy threshold, therefore in accordance with your policy. The existing plans for the development, or the existing site, ordinary family-sized home. The proposal is to convert it into an HMO for 7 people, with permitted development extensions, I believe, already carried out, namely being a rear extension and a rear roof extension, a rear dormer. The property has 2 bedrooms on the ground floor, 3 on the first floor, and 2 on the second floor proposed, total of 7, single occupancy each. Each has a private ensuite shower, toilet with wash-hand basin. There was a small communal WC on the ground floor, small tank room, and then the kitchen living room at the rear. I should add some minor amendments to the plans which neighbours have noticed, and Councillor Swan, which is dealt with in the supplementary matters, but that was simply showing that the doors to the small tank room here were just shown shut as opposed to open, just not to give the impression of blocking the corridor, and a back door was inserted here onto the side to give easier access out into the back garden than past what presumably will be table or sofas at the end of the property in the communal space. Up onto the first floor, again, the ensuite facilities for each bedroom. This one actually has a separate one. One bedroom here doesn't have its own ensuite, and there's a shared ensuite. Presumably will operate mostly for that person, but that's up to the occupiers should it gain planning consent. And then two more ensuites in the roof space. Just for completeness, the section through the property and the elevations showing the extensions in place. There are the superseded floor plans. Again, for completeness, those are the doors that are now shown shut, and that is where the back door has been inserted since the question was asked. Also, the cycle store was previously a bit nebulous in the back garden. It's been confirmed that the proposal is to reuse the existing outbuilding in the back garden. So the application has come to committee because of a substantial number of objections, 75 set out in the report, and also it's been called in by Councillors Weems, Simpson and Swan. Councillor Weems called it in on the matter of parking. Councillor Simpson asked how many HMOs does Hilsea need, and Councillor Swan wished residents to be able to make deputations to this meeting. Along with the 10% rule we've just looked at, the room sizes comply with your standards, and officers are satisfied that the overall disposition and layout, not just the sizes of the rooms, and the whole property is indeed acceptable for occupation by 7 people, hence the application being recommended for approval. Before we come to the deputations, in front of you on the Supplementary Matters Report, called the SMAT, we have some late comments received since publication of the report. From the Battenberg Child Development Centre, which is the health facility I referred to at the end of St Chad's Avenue. As set out here, they state, we already experience misuse of our car park and we are currently trying to find ways of controlling this. It is caused by local residents in St Chad's Avenue who appear not to worry whether it is private property or not. We would suggest an HMO might add to this problem. The officer response is, it's not clear that occupiers of an HMO would be any more likely to misuse the clinic's car park than any other residential occupier in the road. Forgive me, Councillor Swan, if you may be making a deputation, I may repeat some of your points, but obviously I shall read them out here to make sure. Councillor Swan has submitted some comments. He notes that the property has much changed since the Energy Performance Certificate of November 2022. Planning officer response is that the EPC is not relevant to the planning matters to be assessed as part of this planning application. Cliffdale Primary School requested a traffic assessment due to serious concerns over safety for the vulnerable students. The officer response is that the officer report addresses car parking and it concludes there's no reason to withhold planning permission on the matter. It is noted there is quite some distance between the application property and the academy, which is a couple hundred metres, I believe, or so around onto Battenberg Avenue. And then the point about the plans changing, here for completeness, I've just showed you a moment ago the couple of minor changes, and that is because they were minor, there was no need to go back out to public consultation effectively. That's a decision we make on every change that may be proposed to an application. And then an objection from Councillor Weems that arrived overnight, so I direct you to Appendix 1. Councillor Weems has submitted an objection to the HMOs in Hilsea, stroke those he's called into this committee meeting. There were 2 in Hilsea Ward, but there are 5 he has called in, amongst other councillors. These being 52 Bewley Road, 61 St Chad's Avenue, 76 Oriel Road, 47 Belgravia Road and 57 Northern Parade. Chair, I don't know if you want me to read this out for each one or not, but yep, each one, okay. And here are Councillor Wims's comments which are applied to each of these. The applications of all the applications' focus solely is to maximise occupancy. There are multiple residents coming and going at all hours. They cause addition of several vehicles to already congested roads. Large-scale HMOs have attracted incidents of illicit activities such as drug dealing. The impacts must be considered on the local community. I am not against responsible landlords who comply with standards, nor do I condone poorly behaved tenants. What is needed is a balanced approach. There is not an objection to the existence of HMOs, it is to the extent of these developments. The real issue is the scale at which they are being pursued, with properties not truly suiting the number of proposed occupiers. Officer response to maximising occupancy. Each application, of course, is considered on its merits, including adherence to the guidance on space standards. All of the applications on this agenda meet the committee's guidance with respect to space standards. The point about comings and goings at different hours, it's not considered proven that an HMO necessarily results in more comings and goings than a Class C3 dwelling house, nor necessarily at more unsociable hours. Each and every family, each and every HMO may be different. Vehicles on congested roads, again, it's not considered proven that an HMO necessarily results in more vehicles at a property than a Class C3 dwelling house with a family and adult children. Perhaps you can have 3 or 4 cars associated with that property if there's no permit zone in place in the area. The Local Highways Authority has very similar parking expectations of HMOs and Class 3 properties and tends not to object to HMO applications. Concerning illegal activities, again, these are not necessarily related to HMO use. Antisocial behaviour has been shown to be more associated with HMO uses. but not all illegal activities, for example, in particular drug use. And nor are non-HMO residential uses necessarily free of occupiers who conduct illegal activities. Concern about landlords and behaviour and the relationship with landlords. Well, the licensing regime for private sector housing is engaged with the fit and proper test for landlords rather than the planning system. And lastly, concerning the extent of the developments and the scale, if this is talking about community balance, the 10% threshold, we've already dealt with that matter. Here it is 1.96 if approved. Concerning the scale or intensity of occupation of a property, again, the guidance on space standards is in front of you in the report, and this application, indeed all of them, meet the committee's guidance. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Simon. 1 second, John. Councillor Simpson, sorry, can I just confirm which applicant is... Okay, right, okay, all right, okay.
Chair, I've had a note from Councillor Weems just saying that he also sent in some information overnight regarding flooding, which he thinks is pertinent. So I don't know whether you've received that or not.
Councillor Swan, have you got some information?
Yeah, I have that deputation. I will be reading that one out on his behalf.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, okay, deputations. I know we have 3 objectors for this. So you have about 4 minutes each, if you can kind of stick to that sort of time. That would be helpful. Who would like to start? If you get really close.
Britain's got
there
timed.
You go. We can hear.
Good morning, Chair. I'd like to start my objection with a little background to the proposed change of use of St Chad's Avenue, Portsmouth. I bought my house at 48 Battenberg Avenue 32 years and 5 months ago. We bought this property following my discharge from the Royal Navy in 1991. Due to medical grounds, we bought this house because of its location, privacy, both from behind the property and to the left and the right of the property. The house in question, 61 St Chad's, is immediately behind my property and was owned by Jim and Anna, who the latter passed away some 20 years ago, and Jim passed away about 2.5 years ago. The couple were very friendly and had many friends around the area, including us in Battenberg Avenue. Everything was fine until June of this year, when our privacy was shattered by the commencement of the development which is now taking place at 61 St Chad's Avenue. It astounds me that a Victorian end-of-terrace property, which was not damaged during World War II, has been completely ravaged by the building works that have taken place since June. The property in St Chad's is situated in a quiet residential road which has the Battenberg Family Clinic at the end of the road, and also the Cliffdale Early Learning Centre, which is used on a daily basis for taking pupils to and from the facility. Staff and visitors use St Chad's to access these properties, as well as being able to access them limitedly from Battenberg Avenue. I have great concerns for my family, including my great-granddaughter, who is age 4, is autistic and regular visits to us on weekends because her father lives with us. In winter months, the sunlight in our garden barely comes over the house as it is before it was developed, and I feel sadly now we will lose even sunlight into our back garden. I've been reading some of the planning documents online, and according to the planning documents, some 420 to 490 new homes per year will be provided in the city from 2010 until 2027. In order to meet future demand for larger dwellings, the plan states that 40% of the Portsmouth plan requires that new housing development should achieve a target of 4% family dwellings where appropriate. The remaining 60% should be a balance of 1 and 2 bedroom properties. This does not appear to have been considered within this application. The Portsmouth plan also indicates that the size of new build properties, if left unchecked, threatens the future supply of family housing, even to the extent which conversion of properties HMO has reduced the supply of family homes in some parts of the city. These are the council's words, they're not mine, they're written down. Over the last 2 months, we've had to put up with noise, foul language from builders. Despite complaining to Portsmouth City Council, no real action has been taken. On the 21st of July, I had a visit from the developer's point of contact, a chap called Mr. Alistair Farquhar, who came to apologise for the noise and the bad language from the builders, and he would have a word with Zach McGregor, who is one of the company directors for Empire Builders who are doing the work. This appears to have fallen on deaf ears, as even yesterday, 21st of August, bad language was still coming from the property. Mr. Farquhar also advised me that if Portsmouth City Council reject this application, they will appeal to central government and the development would be approved, no matter what the councils here say today. Mr. Farquhar also showed me some pictures on his smartphone of the high-spec rooms, which implied that each of the 7 bedrooms would have double beds in them. I didn't point this out to him at the time. I thought I'd keep that powder dry until it became here today. So that would sort of imply that there's going to be more than 7 people living in that property. I appreciate that I may not be able to stop the proposed development, but if it were developed for a family home, the top and middle floor would be used as bedrooms and not as vantage points to look over residents whose houses are behind them. I have a few pictures of the property, if anyone would like to see them, of before and as it is as of yesterday. I had been taking pictures daily since the development commenced, and I've got one over 120 at the moment, but I've only printed out about 5 or 6. This I had to stop doing on the 27th of July until the 14th of August because I was hospitalised. I also note this development is not following the plan as revised on the 15th of August, in so much as the re-extension has a window and no door as yet. It's worthy of note that the shed that your colleague implied is still there isn't there anymore. That was demolished early on. And I can't see how a cycle shed will still be accessed by the occupants by going through a communal space at the back. I also note that in my letter stating that I objected, that just after dark we get bats flying around the property, but there's been no assessment from anyone to say whether this confirms or denies my observation, and I hope that this development is not going to disturb the bat population wherever they are. I therefore ask the Planning Committee to reject this proposed development on the grounds of invasion of privacy, not just for my property, but surrounding properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mallory. I mean, I think you used the 6 minutes that we have for objections. So I don't know whether you have anything to add.
I'm sorry about that, but we were informed about me having breathing difficulties. That's why it's took me a lot longer.
It's 12 minutes in total for the objectors.
Yeah, sorry, so 12 minutes. So
yes, so they've got
I think
6
you used,
left.
Sorry, yes, thank you. So I think you used a good chunk of it, but that's okay. Well, if you can, keep it as brief as possible, because we've got a lot of business to get through, but we want to hear what you've got to say. Okay? You'll need to turn the other microphone off. There we go. Oh, I think you're just going to have to shout.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
There we go. There we are.
Okay.
There we are.
St Chad's Avenue is a very unique road in that it has a dual aspect. It appears on the map as a cul-de-sac and has all the benefits of a tight-knit community of families and elderly, many of whom have lived here for over 70 years and wish to remain as residents. As well as being a cul-de-sac, it contains the gates to Battenberg Clinic car park. St Chad's provides the only road access to the centres at the back. That is in the car park. That is 2 NHS centres, Cliffdale's Early Years Primary and Nursery, and they are located on the right of the circle that we saw at the beginning. The main school, the primary academy, is located on Battenberg Avenue. Number 61 was owned by an elderly gentleman, a resident of 60 years. He passed away in August 2020, and the neighbours helped care for him in his final phase of life. The house remained unoccupied for 2 years. The neighbours, number 59 and 63, are both elderly, disabled and live alone. This application has received much attention and 75 objections. Residents were very soon made aware of the scale of works by removal of the inside floors, walls and roof, and removal of all outbuildings. The contractor's social media promoted 61 St Chad's as coming soon, this large person 7-bedroom HMO, the second project we have running in the road 2 weeks apart. Source Facebook, and there's a print off if you need it. Work started under permitted development, where the impact of building work on neighbouring properties is not assessed and residents do not get the opportunity to object. Proximity of buildings to boundaries is not scrutinised, and loss of light, design and privacy are considered a civil matter. Neighbours have been severely disadvantaged when the agents, Applecore PDM, managing the application, advertise their HMO services on their website, quote, as giving clients support through loopholes and over hurdles in place to gain full planning approval. And again, we've got a printout if you need to see that. The HMO application. The application form contains some discrepancies. Is the site vacant? No, it was for over 2 years. Foul sewage. Are you proposing to connect to the existing drainage system? No. Trees and hedges? No. Public notification. Only 6 residents were informed. The objection period was then extended by the planning department, but there was no formal notification of an extension. Planning notice was not displayed on the side of the road as 61, but opposite and not at the closest point. Application documents. The transport planning document. No recommendation of a traffic assessment, despite the clinic clearly being on the site map. This is not considering the impact of the surrounding area, point 2.18 HMO SPD. And if that had taken place, it would have been established that the 2 centres are at the end of St Chad's Avenue and the entrance isn't on Battenberg Avenue. Residents' recent HMO applications in the vicinity, e.g. Kensington Road, have had transport assessment where the impact and demand for resident parking is considered. Plans. Original plans included details of existing shed to be developed for cycle storage. This was demolished immediately, and this is what we have looked at today on the updated plans. The revised plans do not show accurate plans for the new cycle shed or outbuilding under PD. The revised plan is the only version available for public viewing, and the explanation given only minor changes, and these are usually taken off public view so they're not confused. I wish to argue that a simple labelling of documents of August and June would prevent any possible confusion. The minor changes are material and layout, removing a kitchen window and adding a side door, and related to licensing and cycle shed, and could be interpreted as misleading the planning process today. Reasons to refuse: inaccurate info on the HMO application and the application not being sufficiently assessed, lack of transparency in notification changes and document handling, changes to layout after objections have closed, St Chad's Avenue not assessed in equal measure to other applications, bias, layout, quality of living in bedroom 2 disrupted by kitchen, noise and frequent movement from the new side door to the proposed cycle shed. No access for bikes round the side, hygiene, bikes being taken through the shed, through the communal space, the kitchen, eating, living area. Lack of space to turn bikes, manoeuvre them round the garden, through the doors, into the cycle shed. Amenity, material consideration, impact on drains. 12 properties detailed in their objections regular issues and complaints about their drains, particularly the eastern end, Randolph Junction. Both number 53, 59 and 63 have had issues. And 59 issues with sewage coming up from the main drain outside and issues in the property. There are 8 bathrooms, but 7 additional bathrooms would worsen this significantly. Overlooking the privacy and increase of noise, properties overlooked as mentioned, side windows, door to 59 and 61, lack of access to health services, reduced in Copner Ward by the merging of Hanway Practice 2020 and the lack of NHS dentists within a 2-mile radius of PO20SD, road, no transport assessment, demand for resident parking already reduced by 37% by drop curbs and other users. No assessment of road safety and the impact of the NHF Cliffdale sites, including disabled access, congestion of clinic, risk of compromising emergency access, disabled access, or the impact on the school risk assessment. Parking, dangerous parking, blocking disabled bays, driveways, hindering emergency vehicle access, point 1.15 and 3.19 of the parking and transport assessment. We need to protect our NHS centres, staff and key workers. Finally, section 149 of the Equality Act, the impact of those in the close vicinity of 61. There is a high concentration of those with protected characteristics, e.g. SEN and ECHP children, vulnerable families, looked after children, those with access to disability provisions such as grants and funded school transport by Portsmouth City Council must be considered. Sensible and fair judgment must be made on this application.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Well, we spent about a quarter of an hour listening to deputations objecting to the application. So I will move on to Councillor Swan to give his deputation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm opposing this application for several reasons, all of which are relevant and should be taken into consideration. Firstly, there are significant numbers of local residents who have objected to the application. There are 77 objections on the portal at last count. A vast majority of the residents at the end of St Chad's, where this development is located, have opposed this. Say nothing of the number of objections from residents from neighbouring roads. Councillor Vernon Jackson has already referenced how much of a shame it is that residents have been ignored in the case of St James, and I hope he will apply that same sense of doing the right thing for this application. It should also be noted that at the end of St Chad's Avenue, our Battenberg Avenue Clinic, which is a NHS family centre, and also Cliffdale Primary Academy, both of whom have expressed serious concerns about the impact of this application on the safety of children. On the safety of the children who attend Cliffdale Academy, the objection states, due to the children's diagnosis and difficulties, they have limited understanding or concept of keeping themselves safe. Most are physically able and enjoy running around the school premises. However, as a consequence of their complex needs, they generally have difficulty with walking long distances, such as to and from home to school. Therefore, although most of the children travel to the school by minibus, we estimate that nearly a third are brought in by their families, by taxi, private car and pushchairs. And I know residents will back me up on how chaotic the area is during prime times, beginning of school, end of school. Cliffdale go on to detail the timings of the children's arrivals coinciding with the movements of residents and express their concerns that approving this application will exacerbate the existing problems with traffic, but also, and most importantly, will put vulnerable children at risk of harm. Mr. Turner, in an email to me yesterday, mentioned that the planning report addresses car parking, concluding no reason to withhold planning permission on the matter. This isn't a parking issue, it's a traffic issue that's already in existence and will be exacerbated by potentially 14 other cars in the area. Despite these concerns, I note no traffic assessment has taken place. Perhaps it could be clarified why, for an area with a school for such vulnerable children, this assessment has not been undertaken. I also note that it has been presented as Cliffdale being on Battenberg Avenue, but as has already been mentioned, access to Cliffdale is at the end of St Chad's Avenue, hence their objections. It's also important to note that although this property is published as 7 beds, as we've already heard, the reality is that there may be as many as 14 people at the property. I note the developer's website shows double beds in their photos as an acknowledgement by the developer that this is the accepted reality. Now, it's going to be argued that there's no evidence that residents of this property will have an adverse effect on parking, but it's a fact that cannot be categorically ruled out. Again, that's potentially up to 14 additional cars driving around the area looking for spaces, spewing out fumes and presenting a safety risk. I would also like to draw attention to the Planning Department report on this application about that references human rights. Section 8.25 talks about human rights and Section 8.26 talks about discrimination. I'm wondering at what point any of this was applied to the residents of St Chad's Avenue, in particular to the human rights of Mrs Patricia Ballantyne, an elderly lady with mobility issues who lives next door to 61 and who has rejected a grant to install a wet room in her flat because she is so frightened by the uncertainty of who may be moving in next door, she doesn't know if she even wants to stay in her home. Now, I know this will almost certainly bring outraged comments about vilification, etc., but this committee must concede that an HMO has a much higher likelihood of frequent resident turnover compared to a family home. Mrs Ballantyne has also lost a huge amount of light from her garden due to the extension on 61 St Chad's. Where is the element of human rights protection that deals with protection of property and gives every person the right to peaceful enjoyment of their possessions? I have visited Mrs Ballantyne and I can quite honestly say that the loss of light to her garden is shocking. As you have heard, this road has some very unique characteristics due to the clinic and the school, and there are very real safety concerns raised, not by me, but by the school itself. This must be taken into consideration, and I respectfully ask for the committee to reject this application.
Thank you. Councillor Swan.
Thank you, Chair. 75 residential objections. When's the last time we've had that many? The residents of St Chad's and even the residents of Battenberg Avenue have come together today to say no more HMOs. HMOs which, based on our own surveys, are subject to more nuisance, more noise and antisocial behaviour. These family homes were made exactly for that, families. All of the residents here today, like all the residents here today, I'm concerned by the amount of super HMOs within the city. These houses are being gutted. And when I say gutted, I mean the walls, floors and roof. This particular building has had building regulators out multiple times as the building was left structurally unsafe on multiple occasions. We as a council need to get a grip on this and also why super HMO policy needs to be looked at, not only by this council, but also by the Government Secretary of State Inspector who likes to overrule our judgments. We encourage greed by allowing 3-bedroom houses to become essentially 7 to 8 bedroom flats. They weren't built for it. While it's not a material change, I'm still dumbfounded how the sewers can handle the extra household of waste. I have looked at these plans today and I think the committee should refuse the application based on 2 material applications. Firstly, the combined living space is at a bare minimum. We should be permitting high quality accommodation, not just squeezing a shared space to tick a box. Some of the committee have been to showings where the combined living space has been above the threshold, and even then it's questionable if it's big enough. This is not big enough or good enough, probably because it's not built to accommodate 7 people. The second impact is what HMOs bring to the areas. more noise, more nuisance and antisocial behaviour. We must trust our own surveys and draw the line to these super HMOs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Russell. Okay. Thank you. Carry on.
Good morning, everyone. As you all know, at Apical, we are passionate about providing high-quality shared homes. We have an ever-growing reputation for high-end design HMOs for students and professionals. And as you'll be aware, Portsmouth size standards for HMOs demand some of the largest in the UK. At Apical, we always strive to meet or exceed that. During recent years, Apical has led the way in terms of designing high-quality HMO accommodation within the city. The increase in quality HMOs is in part due to the high standards set in place by this planning committee and also down to some of the clients I represent today who share our passion for high-end shared living. Again, I'd like to extend to you all an invite to see a finished HMO which has been designed, built and will be managed by Apical, with one nearing completion which any of you are welcome to view in the next couple of weeks. During the last committee, questions were raised by a member of the public regarding the strain on the water services. Within the design package we provide, we specify a minimum of 375-litre water tanks with an additional accumulator tank. These are designed to fill up in periods of low use and store. This enables the residents to have instant high-pressure hot water 24 hours a day with no further strain on the water pressure to the street. I do think it's important to note a family home of this size could easily house 7 residents without these additional measures put in place to mitigate against any additional pressure on public services. There was also a HMO refused by committee last month due to the shape of the fully compliant communal area. I note Councillor Hunt made comments around the inspectorate having decided with similar decisions of this nature. I feel it's important to share that the inspectorate did side with this decision of refusal made by this committee on a communal area in one case only, which was a separate dining room leading into a separate kitchen. There have been many other refusals based on shape and usability of open plan communal areas by this committee that have not been upheld on appeal. I think it's important for members to have a clear picture of inspectorate decisions when making a decision today which could ultimately cost council taxpayers money when costs are sought at appeal. Whilst I appreciate it's fully within your gift as a planning committee to determine the application, I urge you to take into account the applications today all fully comply and exceed the high standards set in place by you as members of this committee. I respectfully ask that you consider the need for high quality shared homes within the city when making your decisions. The application for 61 St Chad's is for a change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to a 7-person house in multiple occupation. All bedrooms meet or exceed 10 square metres and the required communal area is 23.02, again meeting your 22.5 square metre requirement. I know Councillor Simpson's comment about only just meeting the space. The space that you actually dictate as a council is one of the largest in the UK, so only just meeting is still a great deal larger than every other borough that we work with on the South Coast. There was a large existing outbuilding at the property that was poorly built. This will be rebuilt as per the original existing outbuilding to provide cycle storage. I note objections relating to parking. From our managed 7-bed HMO portfolio, the average car ownership per house is just 3 cars. This would not be dissimilar to an average family home with older children. Refusals based on parking in the city have also not been upheld on appeal. Double beds, again, are regularly used within our shared HMOs, because it would be most adults' preference to sleep within a double bed. I personally would not want to sleep in a single bed if I was renting one of these properties. It does not mean it's for double occupancy. This will be managed by a HMO licensing regime and will not give a licence for 14 people, like it has been suggested. The planning officer's recommended a fully compliant application for approval today, and I ask you all to fully support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Weems' deputation is going to be read by Councillor Swan, so back to you.
Chairman, just before I do that, Mr States was going to give a deputation, which obviously we aren't able to, and there was a photo that went with it. If I could distribute that. Thank you. Are you happy for me to start? You will have all received some data regarding the flooding instances from Councillor Weems last night. Dear members of the committee, I wish to emphasise the utmost importance of thoroughly assessing the potential flooding risks associated with the application for converting the residents at 61 St Chad's into an HMO. The information I bring to your attention is not only significant but also concerning, as it pertains to the frequent instances of flooding that have occurred in the vicinity. I've received information from Southern Water, an entity that specialises in the management of our water system. The data they have provided, which I'm sharing with you, paints a worrisome picture of repeated flooding incidents in the immediate area surrounding the proposed development. Allow me to highlight a few of these instances for your consideration. On the 17th of February 2022, St Chad's Avenue, a flooding event occurred due to a blocked combined sewer attributed to the accumulation of rags, ash and grit within the system. On the 5th of May 2022, in Battenberg Avenue, another instance of flooding was reported, this time on Battenberg Avenue. The cause was a blocked combined sewer, with the obstruction being attributed to factors other than rags, ash and grit. The 1st of August 2022, St Chad's Avenue, yet again, St Chad's Avenue experienced flooding due to a blocked combined sewer. This incident reinforces the vulnerability of the sewer system to various factors that lead to blockages. On the 18th of February 2023, in St Chad's Avenue, a reoccurring issue. This event involved flooding caused by a blocked combined sewer. Reason for the blockage was once again attributed to the presence of rags, ash and grit. These instances are just a glimpse into the recurrent challenges faced by the community, with flooding incidents frequently affecting the streets neighbouring the proposed 61 St Chad's HMO. While the application itself may not have undergone a capacity check, it is evident that the cumulative impact of the existing flooding instances, coupled with the potential for additional water demand from new developments, poses a substantial threat. In reviewing the provided data, it is evident that numerous flooding incidents have occurred on streets like St Chad's Avenue and Battenberg Avenue, both of which are closely situated to the proposed HMO. Notably, these incidents encompass a range of sewer types, including combined and foul sewers, and vary in terms of sewer status. The frequency of these incidents and the diversity of the affected areas underscore a persistent issue that we cannot afford to overlook. We must acknowledge that the proposal to introduce an HMO into an environment that is already experiencing flooding raises legitimate concerns about the safety and well-being of potential residents. This situation prompts us to consider the feasibility of accommodating further connections to the already burdened sewer system. I implore the committee to take a proactive stance in safeguarding our community's interests by taking into account the comprehensive flood data presented here. The responsibility rests with us to ensure that our decisions prioritise the protection of residents and the mitigation of potential risks. In light of the facts before you, I urge each of you to carefully evaluate the implications of granting approval for the 61 St Chad's HMO application. The future safety and well-being of our residents hinge on the conscientious consideration of the data that highlights the recurring challenges posed by flooding in this area. Thank you for your attention to this critical matter. Sincerely, Councillor Daniel Weems.
Thank you, Councillor Swan and Councillor Weems. Members, questions? Councillor Hunt.
Can I ask the planning officer, some of the pictures that we've been shown this morning, I mean, are they done under permitted development? Because I came to this with an open mind, but the pictures I've seen so far indicate to me, you know, the brickwork and the mortar and so on would cause a sense of enclosure to the residents nearby, and also the large extension in the roof, which goes almost across the width of the building. And I know that's pretty standard nowadays. Is that, how does that overlook? Are the windows going to be kept shut, and are there going to be tinted glass, not tinted glass, but opaque glass in it, so there's no overlooking into this gentleman's back property? And what's the difference between this gentleman's back property, the former sailor, Mr. Dudley, I think, and the main part of the building opposite his back wall. It's 3 questions, Simon, I think.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the permitted development matter does cause confusion, and I understand that for people who have not encountered it before, but a number of comments from the residents as well have raised concerns about privacy, overlooking, overshadowing, noise from the building work, bad language from the builders. Those are the principal issues. Bats as well, any concern about bats. Permitted development rights exist whether this is a family home or being converted into an HMO. So this property could have been occupied by a family, and many properties are, and people make use of permitted development rights to extend their property. So those extensions are not only associated with an HMO use. And because it's permitted development, the council is unable to control. As long as it meets the size and position criteria and other matters, it can't control, as long as they build in accordance with the regulations. So it can be a certain depth and length and height and so on. If it complies with those, it complies, and there's no action that the planning department could take, even though it may have a degree of effect, to some degree or other, on the neighbours for the different matters identified. So unfortunately, that is not a direct association with this HMO necessarily, or can't be controlled through this application. It's not part of this application, the permitted development extensions. Some windows do require to be frosted or above a certain height, councillor, to pick up that point, where they're on the side, for example, because the government over the many years has kept that policy going, presumably to do with privacy and so on. But in this instance, with rear-facing windows from the rear dormer, clearly the government, or any government in the past, doesn't deem that to cause unreasonable extra overlooking. You've already got first floor windows, for example, on a property, looking down a garden, looking into the back garden and towards the rear elevation of the neighbours to the rear on Battenberg Avenue in this instance. And I suppose the government would say, you already have existing overlooking, some new windows slightly higher, slightly further back on the roof, would not materially change that. You've got other neighbours, etc., all overlooking gardens. So I hope that, broadly speaking, answers your question.
Well, if I can just come back, Mr. Turner, I do beg your pardon, but I'm not really quite clear. So, for example, if I thought that in this particular case, the permitted development caused a sense of enclosure through bricks and mortar, particularly on the lady next door, and that overlooking had an adverse impact on the residential amenities of people who wanted to enjoy their back garden, where the swimming pool it was, for example, are we able to move because it's permitted development, from what you're saying, are we able to move a proposition that would refuse this application on those grounds?
The simple answer is no, because it is already permitted development. So yes, there may be an effect on the neighbour. People will have different opinions on the effect, depending on the property, the individual, etc., and there will be an effect to some degree or other, but yes, it is permitted development. So this committee, this local planning authority, can't impose itself on the effect of those permitted developments.
Yes, I'm glad that we've teased that out, because the government changed the permitted development rules so that there could be much larger extensions like this.
Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Sorry, I want to go down the same line. So, Mr. Turner, in terms of this planning application, are we just looking at whether this can be an HMO, but they can do all the rest of the building that's happening without needing to ask for planning permission?
That's correct. The permitted development extensions are permitted development, so they're applying for the use of the building as an HMO by 7 persons.
So the government have removed the need for people to get planning permission, and every house down this road could do exactly the same in terms of an extension at the back and a dormer on the roof without asking for planning permission. Is that correct?
It will always depend on the nature of each individual property, but broadly speaking, probably yes.
Okay, so I've got a whole series of other questions, Chairman, so don't run away. Okay, so that is worrying. And can I ask, the distance between the windows, I know we've talked at times about overlooking from window to window, and I know there is not a hard and fast rule, but is there a distance where it becomes difficult in terms of overlooking and gives us reasons to be able to oppose?
Some councils do have distance separation guidance. This council does not, but it can't be, even if we had one, or even a subjective judgment that you're asking about, can't exist when there's permitted development. We cannot control that permitted development if it meets the standards.
So the government have removed our ability to be able to say no to this because of overlooking from the new windows.
That's right. These sorts of permitted development allowances have existed for donkey's years.
Okay. And Mr. Turner, I know we had thousands of people who objected to the St James's planning application, and the government chose to ignore them. In terms of a government planning inspector looking at an application like this, what weight does it give to 75, 1,000, 2,000 different objections to a development?
The planning authority today, by officers and by members, will always consider any objections, whether it's 1 or 100 or 1,000, as would a planning inspector. A large number of objections, it's not a vote. They've got to be material considerations, and there will be judgments made by the professionals and the local planning authority as to the weight those objections hold against the merits of the application. It doesn't necessarily follow that a lot of objections leads to a refusal, and it doesn't necessarily follow that no objection leads to an approval. But of course, you are sitting here today as the local planning authority, correctly listening to local concerns and taking them into account, as an inspector does as well.
Sorry, 2 more questions, sorry, Chair. Mr. Turner, residents have rightly said that parking is an issue. This is a house that is 1 car wide, but the developer says it's likely to have 3 cars based there. Is that a reason that we can use for saying no to this development?
In officer's opinion, we don't think there's a reason to refuse planning permission on parking, because the nature of parking between a good-sized family home, the number of cars that could be associated with that would depend on the occupancy level. Is it 1 person? Is it 6 people? Are they adults or children? Against 7 people occupying it, again with an unknown level of car ownership and use. So, as we pointed out in the Supplementary Matters report, the Highways Authority sees little difference in demand between an HMO of this size and a family dwelling of this size, and indeed planning officers would say the same. So we don't anticipate, it's hard to attribute necessarily a greater level of parking with this use than the current previous dwelling house use.
My final question, I think that the stuff about flooding from Councillor Weems is extremely worrying. I know in terms of water supply by Portsmouth Water, there isn't an issue here, so we don't have a hosepipe ban, but in terms of sewerage from Southern Water, it is an issue, and we know the sewers are at capacity. So adding extra bathrooms, and there are a lot of extra bathrooms here, into an area where there is a documented problem with flooding of the sewers would seem to be very worrying. Is this something we should be taking account of?
We can certainly listen to it and take account of it, but it is out with the planning system in this instance, I would say. Having 7 bathrooms, not 14 individuals, by the way, has been talked about. This is an application for 7 persons to occupy the premises, and that would be controlled by licensing. So in terms of parking and sewers and so on, it's not 14 people, it would be 7. Although there may be 7 showers, that doesn't mean to say that they'll be used less intensively than a family bathroom that would be used by 1, 2, 6, 7 people in a different way. So again, a bit like the parking, we don't believe that there is necessarily a materially different use of water in an HMO property compared to a family C3 use. for example, with young children requiring lots of clothes washing, etc., slightly older children at school, playing sports, etc., etc. So normally family water use is also, or may also be relatively high, against 7 adults having a shower a day and cooking. In any event, whether or not you agree with my debate about occupancy and use of water, the sewage undertaker has a responsibility to provide a public sewer for local conditions. So they need to be dealing with the sewage conditions that are already outlined, whether or not there is that HMO. Obviously, flooding is extremely distressing and difficult for anyone concerned, and that is indeed why the undertaker has those responsibilities.
Councillor Dent.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. Some relating, maybe one not. Most of these properties were built around about 1930. Are we actually just waiting, because I haven't seen some of these photographs of what they're doing inside these properties, are we just waiting for another accident like happened in Langford Road, where the house imploded on itself? Lucky enough, no one was injured in that circumstances. But are we just waiting for someone to actually get seriously injured, the way these places are being destructed? The other thing is, we keep mentioning about sewerage. Eventually, the sewerage system is not going to cope if we keep banging in more and more HMOs. Looking at what Daniel Eames sent over, 65 times in and around that area, the sewerage system got blocked. We're adding another 1,000+ litres of wastewater going into that system per day. Eventually what's going to happen is it's just going to flood the place. We've spent all this money on flood defences, but all we're doing is we're flooding it from inside out. And as for the overlooking point, looking at this photograph there, and basically they can look straight out of their window, straight into her garden, straight, and next door as well, both elderly. I think it's an absolute disgrace, personally, but that's my opinion. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Dent. Simon, would you like to come back at this?
I don't particularly want to repeat myself about sewage and flooding. I've just answered that point. I've answered the point about overlooking. In terms of another accident to happen, in terms of the house falling down, I think there have been 2 in the last year or so. One, I think, resulted from poor building work historically. The other, was it a gas explosion? I can't remember. With respect to building work, as noted already by at least one of the neighbours, the high degree of conversion works and structural works to that property is being monitored by the building consultancy department. So the structure of that building, has to pass the relevant tests and meet the relevant criteria.
Okay, members? Comments? Gerald.
Thank you, Chairman. Often at this committee, I have to say that although I listen to what the residents have said, and people don't like housing multiple occupation, the government rules give us very, very little power to say no. We have the strictest rules of almost any council anywhere in terms of HMOs, but even with those, government planning inspectors regularly overturn our decisions to say no to HMOs, and it happened anyway. So I don't want to be in the realm of just playing to the gallery and giving false hope to local residents. So it is, all the building work can be done without asking for planning permission, and the government have taken that ability for us to say no away. I think they're completely wrong, but that's what the government have decided, and in being brutal about it, it's unlikely to change with a change in government, because people in central government like development to happen. So our powers are very limited. They've said we've lost appeals where we objected in terms of parking, and there is no point trying to waste money. But the thing I think that is different here, and is why I'm going to propose refusal of this, is the issue of the flooding. I think we've got material evidence for here that there is a real issue with flooding in this local area, and that putting in 7 bedrooms with all these bathrooms will add to the problem of flooding of the sewage system, and We have a combined wastewater and sewage problem. We know the problems that caused. People will remember what happened when Eastney Pumping Station failed and we had sewage flowing through the streets of this city. Things are better now that there's the backup system, but I think we have a duty to say if there is a problem locally here, we should not be adding to it, and therefore I think on that grounds, I think we have a reason to refuse where there is a hope of being able to win it at appeal. Because there's no point in us saying in this meeting, we're going to say no, having an absolute 100% certainty that the government planning inspector will just overrule us and give more money to the developers out of taxpayers' money. So I think we've got a reason here that we can say no, and I'm happy to propose that.
Happy to
Councillor
second.
Dent.
Happy to second.
Okay.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
I'm waiting for the officer's report on this issue of, reply rather, on this issue of flooding. So I'll be interested to hear what the planning officer's view is about potential flooding, localised flooding at this place.
Thank you. One planning application may bring into various questions that may or may not be dealt with under the planning regime, and it's not unusual for officers to be telling members of the public and councillors that one issue is dealt with by another regulatory regime, and therefore it is inappropriate, it's unnecessary for planning to deal with it. For example, the structure of this property, it's been converted with permitted development. The structure of this property is properly dealt with by another regulatory regime, the building regulations, and so it would be ultra vires for the planning authority to get involved with that. With respect to flooding, again, it will be ultra vires beyond the planning authority's powers to get involved with drainage, because the statutory undertaker, Southern Water, has a duty to provide drainage for properties. There may be a flooding problem currently, and I don't belittle that whatsoever, and presumably Southern Water are trying to address that. So with respect to a planning appeal and costs, just to be very clear, just like St James's, having an appeal does not necessarily mean there are any costs involved. Most appeals do not have an application for costs made by the appellant. But if there is an application for costs, there are reasons as to, or grounds on which that claim may be upheld by the inspector. In this instance, imposing conditions or refusing the application because of sewerage and flooding that is dealt with by another regulatory regime means that refusal or the conditions imposed, they're not necessary because there was another regime to deal with that. And so a refusal or imposition of conditions in this instance would, I believe, in this instance, I don't think it's a matter of judgment, I think it's pretty black and white, lead to an appeal being dismissed, and quite possibly. Officers don't try and scaremonger at all about the danger of costs at all. It's more often raised by members of the public or by members. But in this instance, because it would be ultra vires of the local and planning authority to refuse the application on the grounds of flooding because of the sewers, there could be a cost claim and a costs award against the council.
Yeah, you're quite right. Sorry, whilst I'm in the mood, as it were. You're quite right. The deputation mentioned costs earlier on, so you're quite right, Mr. Turner. So let me get this right. We may not consider sewerage or this localised flooding at all, Mr. Turner. Is that correct? Or would we be able to say, for example, defer this? I don't like deferring things, but this is come upon us rather suddenly. There's nothing in the report about it. I heard nothing in the pre-agenda about it, and suddenly we arrive at the committee, as we sometimes do. We hear a troublesome issue, and this troublesome issue in this particular matter today is about some localised flooding, which I did not know. It surprised me. I didn't know anything about it. So is it possible for us to defer this to get any further information? But even if we did get the further information, would it have any bearing on our decision?
Thank Thank you, Councillor. I don't think it would have any bearing for the reasons I've given. The committee might want to reach that deferral point to receive assurances, but the advice I've given is quite clear about a different regulatory regime, and therefore the planning authority getting involved with that being ultra vires. No, we wouldn't recommend a deferral either.
Councillor Smith.
Chair, in Simon's opening sort of gambit, he mentioned that there was no known HMOs in the area, in the radius. Is there an inference there then that there might be some unknown? And if that is the case, when's the survey going to be done?
We're on comments, but I'll take it as a question. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. No inference by that. It's with every application we say we don't necessarily have 100% information within the 50-metre radius. We have our 3 data sources that we look at, and then we listen to what members of the public, neighbours may say and what councillors may say. And I don't think there's been any on the 7 items today, but occasionally members see an item coming to you where we say our data reveals 3 HMOs, for example, within the 50-metre radius, and residents have also referred us to 2 other properties where they believe. So we listen carefully also to evidence on the ground, if you like, and we'll investigate those ones through researching the data again, knocking on the door, speaking to the owner, etc. So the database, the data we have, we believe is pretty reliable, as good as it can be, and there's no inference that there are or could be. We're just not saying 100%.
Members, there is a motion on the table.
Could I just round up, if I may? I'm not going to be a hypocrite here. I have an extension coming out my back roof, exactly the same as the one in the picture, and I look down onto my residence, all the way up and down, and truthfully, I don't know what it's like in St Chad's Avenue along there, but if you look up and down the row of houses, which are similar, smaller actually, than the houses in St Chad's Avenue along my street, every other property's got a similar extension at the back. So I've thought about that. What I am really concerned about, but there's nothing that we can do, is the impact of that bricks and mortar on the lady next door. But we have heard very clearly that that is permitted development rights, and if people want to change those permitted development rights, well, they've got to jolly well vote for a different administration in government. But as we heard from Councillor Vernon Jackson, it's still unlikely to change. Even so, I am concerned about sewage. We keep on hearing about this. The government's told us we've got to build another 17,000 homes in this city. And these HMOs, whether we like them or not, they are symptomatic of that particular issue. There simply aren't enough places for people to live. So the government has adjusted the national planning policy framework to make it easier for HMOs to come into being. We do have one, despite what anybody wants to believe or not, we do have one of the strongest policies or set of policies here. You even heard the agent describe how that Portsmouth, they deal with a number of local authorities, that the agent says that the room sizes here are the strictest or the largest that she encounters. I am concerned about this localised flooding. I'm not going to vote for something till I'm clear in my head about flooding, and it's been described as localised flooding. I remember we chucked out a number of applications in the bottom end of Cosham, around the bottom of Railwood, where the drains pop up and the water comes down off the hill and it floods properties down there. It's localised flooding, so that concerns me. So I'm going to abstain.
You're not going to develop your thoughts around deferring?
No, I can't defer because with the advice I've been given.
We can defer. We can
well, all right then. I'll leave the deferral on the table and see if we can get some information back from the senior planning officers about this, and maybe something will change in between. I don't know. All right, so I'll leave that there. Whether I've got a seconder or not, I don't know.
Okay, I just thought it was worth exploring whether members thought there was any room. Councillor Candlish?
I would have a question relating to the sewage and the flooding issues. So I'm relatively new to the committee, but when we look at big developments, we are asked to look at things like whether sewage and flood defences are adequate. Is there a difference, because this is a single property, that is different to a big one? Is it a point of principle or is it a point of regulation?
I mean, we're on questions, but on comments, not questions, but it's okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, that's a good point. First of all, it's a matter of size. Each and every application is on its own merits. An application in a critical area of flooding may be treated differently to one that's not in a critical area. In this instance, this is a small development and it's conversion of a property. You're not covering green land, for example, with a house and or houses and having more runoff as a result. So development, large-scale developments which involve land that's either derelict or greenfield land that currently will absorb some of the water to some degree, and then if you place houses on it, it will run off much quicker and cause flooding. That's why, A, because of their scale and the nature of the development, flooding is a planning consideration for those sorts of applications. But in this instance, we're talking about localised, and again, not belittling the problem that may exist in the area of sewage, but it's a small-scale development. I've already set out an argument that it's hard to say there is necessarily any difference in water use anyway, but even if there were, it's small-scale, and the Sewerage Authority has a responsibility to deal with it.
Chair?
Oh, okay.
I therefore have a comment, which is I might disagree with that, and I dislike deferring and I dislike abstaining because I think we have to make decisions here. But I disagree with the officer on this one in that although it is a small, relatively small potential change in water and sewage usage, it is occurring in an area we are, at the very last moment, learning might be a critical area, at least a critical area for the residents concerned. For that specific reason, because we've already heard there are many other frustrations or feelings that we might have about the system, but which we cannot use, I actually would, in this instance, support Councillor Hunt in a deferral.
You're seconding the motion?
I'm not entirely sure whether he is proposing it. Were he to be proposing it, I would be seconding it.
Yes. All right.
Can I just ask what the deferral would be for?
To seek further information from the planning officers in conjunction with the water authorities concerned to address the concerns raised about the impact on residential amenity caused by flooding.
Thank you.
Okay, members, I feel we're probably at the point where we take the motions in front of us. The first one was the Vernon Jackson Dent motion to refuse the application for, you want some wording, don't you?
I don't think it's been seconded yet, has it?
No, it has. Councillor Dent, there was...
Oh, sorry.
There was applause happening at the time. Do you have some wording?
Well, if I may say, we could work that up fairly straightforwardly. We've got PCS 12 of the Portsmouth plan and anything in the MPPF, so we could work up a reason quite straightforwardly were that to be the case on flooding.
All right. I would be happy to trust Simon to get the correct wording. We know the principle.
Okay, so the Gerald Van Jessen, Raymond Dent, motion to refuse the application on the grounds of flooding. Those in favour? In favour of the motion to refuse? And against? And abstentions? Okay, Juliet.
Planning permission is refused.
Thank you, Juliet. Okay, Queen's Road. Thank you, everyone.
Chair, I'm sorry. At 12:30, I have another meeting that I need to pop into. I shall keep on going and I'll come back, but my apologies, I need to be somewhere else at 7 tonight.
Okay. Councillor Dent, you're not leaving, are you? Simon, Queen's Road.
And colleagues, I put a jug of water at the back and some mugs if people need refreshment.
Queen's Road. Queen's Road.
Chair, could you repeat your bingo order of
Queen's
play?
Road, agenda item 6. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at 27 Queen's Road, at the western end of Queen's Road, for a change of use from a C3 dwelling house to a flexible use, either continued use as C3 dwelling house or Class C4 small HMO, having the ability to change between those for a period of 10 years on and off without the need for further planning permission. You can see the application property outlined in red on the plan on the left-hand side, and again an aerial photograph on the right-hand side. This is the property end of terrace. With respect to the 50-metre HMO data count, there are 2 currently to make out to the south there, and diagonally opposite to the southeast. 2 currently, were this application to be approved and it were to be used as a C4 at any time in that 10-year period, would bring the number of HMOs up to 3 out of 61, which is a percentage of 4.91% below the policy threshold of 10%. Fairly typical terraced or end terrace property with the main body of the house and then the rear wing. Like most of the HMO applications, this does involve permitted developments, single-storey rear extension, and the roof extensions to provide an enlarged property in which to accommodate up to 6 people if occupied by unrelated adults as a Class C4 property. Taking you through the property, we have a bedroom with an ensuite at the front, a communal bathroom, or WC, sorry, communal WC in the middle there, a living room, and then the communal kitchen dining room to the rear. And then on the first floor, bedroom and ensuite, bedroom and ensuite, bedroom and ensuite, and again 2 more bedrooms with en-suites in the roof. These all meet the guidance standards in terms of size and a subjective judgment about configuration as well, and the overall property, and the living room on the ground floor is an extra. So notwithstanding the objections from 11 households, with those 2 principal matters being acceptable or meeting policy standards, the application is recommended for approval. There are no updates, and we have deputations from various parties.
Thank you, Simon. Mr. Tran, welcome. 6 minutes to give. 6 minutes to give your deputation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Planning Committee. As a local resident, I appreciate the opportunity to express concerns about the reclassification of 27 Queen's Road. The following are key concerns. Concern number 1, paragraph 6.0 consultations. The report acknowledges the high demand for parking, particularly in the evenings and weekends, paragraph 6.3. No traffic assessment or parking survey information has been provided, paragraph 6.4 and 6.6. Quoting directly from a report, there is a potential for increased instances of residents driving around an area hunting for a parking space. Although an issue for a residential amenity, this could justify a reason for refusal, and consequently you should give this due weight in your determination of the planning application. Concern number 2, determining issue 8.2, principle of development. The report confirms 2 HMOs already in a 50-metre radius, but later contradicts this by stating that the total number of HMOs would still only be 2 if 27 Queen's Road were to be converted into a HMO. Paragraph 8.18. It also acknowledges potential inaccuracies of this data, paragraph 8.5. Considering the conflicting statements in the report, a more accurate review is necessary to assess the impact of an additional HMO. Furthermore, the impact of the subdivided flats on the saturation percentage of 10% should carefully be considered. The report states 7 subdivided flats, paragraph 2.2, and 2 HMOs already within a 50-metre radius, which puts dwellings with multiple unrelated occupants per plot at 14.75%, well over the saturation rate of 10%. And if 27 Queen's Road were to be granted HMO class, this would put the number at 16.39%. Again, I urge the Council to collect and report more timely and accurate information, along with considering the impact of subdivided flats on saturation levels, to fairly represent the local residents who have consistently and overwhelmingly voiced issues of high-density housing and their impacts on the quality of life and sense of community on the area, along with the fact that Portsmouth is already the most densely populated city in the South East's 64 local authority areas, reference free ons.gov.uk. Concern 3, determining issue 8.14, impact on neighbouring living conditions. The report repeatedly claims that C4 HMO will have minimal impact on living conditions, justifying this assertion on the assumption that HMO's household is similar size to that of a parent typical family with multiple adult children owning multiple cars. Paragraph 8.15, 8.17, 8.22. However, the planned property has the potential to house 6 to 12 adult occupants, which contrasts ons.gov.uk statistics, reference 1, which states the average household size is 2.36 persons, and the largest proportion, 43% of families in the UK have no children. Comparing C3 and C4 household sizes to justify the minimal impact on living conditions is arbitrary and unfair assumption that warrants reconsideration and better informed averages. Concern 4, determining issue 820, highways and parking. The proposal undermines the impact that the required increase of 0.5 parking spaces assumes a large family and or many adult children owning separate vehicles. Paragraph 8.22. Given the ONS statistic mentioned earlier on average household size and family composition, and a .gov.uk statistic, reference 2, on car ownership, this assumption is ill-informed. The demand for parking is evident from both the report and local resident testimonies. Comprehensive data collection on parking situation is crucial, considering Queen's Road has a high amount of tradespeople requiring large vehicles, vital disabled parking bays and reserved off-road driveway spaces. Along with its narrow width being the most direct route between Copner Road and London Road, means that a reserved 0.5 increase to estimate to parking requirement even still has a negative compounding effect on the above. To support development, I propose a more data be collected on the parking situation in Queen's Road, where it states in Parking Standards and Transport Assessment SPT July 2014, paragraph 3.9, curbside parking surveys evidence with data and photographs can be an effective way of assessing levels of available parking. The Lambeth model, reference 10, is a good one to follow. Applicants should note that in many areas of Portsmouth, in particular those dominated by terraced houses, it is unlikely that there will be sufficient on-street capacity to meet the needs of additional development. And also, to escalate and highlight the seriousness of the issue of parking Queen's Road and in general Portsmouth, in the same document, paragraph 1.4, research by CABE found that car parking remains a significant issue for residents and house buyers, reference 6. Many felt that designs for new developments should accommodate parking to reflect typical levels of car ownership. In addition, further research showed that parking and problems associated with parking were a major source were major sources of neighbourhood disputes and antisocial behaviour. Concern 5, in reference to PCS 20 HMO document, to finalise, I quote from paragraph 216, in accordance to policy PCS 23, the City Council will ensure application for HMO developments will protect the amenity and provision of good standing of living environment for neighbouring and local occupiers. Also, in 217, it will be taken as an indication an application for HMO development would likely to fail to protect the amenity and the provisions of good standard of living environment for neighbouring and local occupiers where there is a concentration or proliferation of HMOs within the local area and it will cause material harm to the proposed existing and or adjacent users, residents, occupiers, or is liable to be detrimental to human health. In conclusion, I urge the Planning Committee to reconsider reclassification for 27 Queen's Road, where with a more accurate and comprehensive assessment on, of parking demand, HMO concentration, reserved or inappropriate assumptions on average household sizes, and potential impacts on living conditions. This approach aligns with the City Council's responsibility to safeguard the well-being and quality of life for all residents. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Tran. Councillor Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was approached by Mr. Matthew Whelan regarding giving a deputation on his behalf, which of course I'm happy to do, because unfortunately he cannot be here. All of the 11 objections mention parking. The situation is already intolerable. The committee report estimates the development's parking demand taking up to 2 car parking spaces. Any resident of Queen's Road or the surrounding roads will tell you this is a total fantasy. The parking situation has got worse every year with the increased number of HMOs. It's impossible to guess how many cars the theoretical tenants of a HMO will have. A lot of nearby residents work in construction and therefore have not only a car but also a work van. Car ownership is high. Government website suggests that there were 12 cars for every 10 households in England in 2021, with car ownership at around 78%. So the figure of two extra cars for 6 people seems woefully low. Tenants also have guests, so there could be 10 to 12 extra cars using the surrounding roads which are already congested. The reality for the residents is that it's impossible to park anywhere near their house in the evenings. I know of people who have had to park a mile away. Shift workers who cannot find places to park after a shift and have to walk alone in all weathers to get back home. The constant circling of frustrated drivers late at night is terrible for the environment, and the stress this adds to people's daily lives is already at unacceptable rates. This HMO will make this problem worse for people at a time where pressures on individuals and households are already high. The idea of a cycle storage is a good idea, but it's at the rear of the garden, and looking at the floor plan, it doesn't seem convenient and perhaps impossible for bikes to be walked through the house. Bikes would need to be turned, walked through the combined living area, presumably past 4 to 5 other people cooking, through another door, then navigated past a tight left turn at the bottom of the stairs, and finally down the hall. If I were a tenant viewing this property, I would not consider that bike friendly. I would, however, assume that due to easy access to the motorway, prospective tenants who have cars would find that location appealing. The property is too small to safely and comfortably accommodate this many people. The Portsmouth Council HMO SPD from 2019 states that a combined living space for 6 or more persons should be 34 metres square, a kitchen 11 metres square and a dining room 14 metres square. The proposed plans do not meet these minimum requirements. The owners of 27 Queen's Road have made it clear that they intend to convert the dining room into a 7th bedroom, reducing the living space further. This is reflected in plans I've received, which have the living room marked as bedroom 7. This negates point 8.11 of the committee report, which states that the additional living room makes up for the inadequacies of the kitchen dining area. Another concern is discharging water waste from 6 people plus guests via 6 additional bathrooms in the narrow clay waste pipe serving number 27, my property and others. This is a health hazard. There was a case in Southsea recently where a clay drainage pipe collapsed and sewage discharged into properties and the downstairs pub. Finally, I note that in the committee report, point 18.15 states that the level of activity associated with the occupation by a single family would be unlikely to be significantly different from the occupation of the property by between 3 and 6 unrelated persons as a HMO. I strongly object to this point. There is a vast difference between 6 unrelated adults plus adult guests sharing a home versus a family, and I think most residents would agree with me. It is also in the HMO owner's interest to keep the building fully occupied, so an occupancy level below 6 is unlikely to last for long. Please retain this property as a family home. There is no need to keep subdividing these small Victorian homes and making surrounding residents' lives worse. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Swan. Mr Hill.
Sorry. Good afternoon. Firstly, thank you for providing me the opportunity to provide this deputation today. In my opinion, Portsmouth is an unbelievable city, and it's made even more exceptional by its covenants, but chiefly by its residents, and that's all of its residents. My business has converted and operates a significant number of very well managed HMOs within the city, and the sympathetic conversion of HMOs is our primary business. As a business and as individuals, we're extremely passionate about providing high quality living accommodation for the people of this city. I understand that this is a highly emotive subject for neighbouring residents, and I sympathise somewhat. People can often be concerned about the unknown, and I accept that they haven't necessarily previously had experience of our business. All of the works that are being carried out must be compliant with building regulations. In fact, in my experience in carrying out these conversions, we tend to have significantly more inspections by building control than we would carrying out similar works on a standard property. I say this only to highlight and to object to one of the comments that was made earlier about whether it's just a ticking time bomb before there's another gas explosion or some poor quality building work that's been uncovered. In fact, during the conversion of the significant number of properties that we have worked on, we've found a number of very historic works which have fortunately been identified and then rectified that were nothing to do with us, and either were historic works that were carried out or were to do with the original construction of the building. I believe that this council and the planning committee should look to encourage the ownership and effective management of compliant and desirable HMOs so that this city can thrive. One of the ironies of the fact that these HMOs have to come to committee is that there are a significant number of very, very poor HMOs that are already in operation in this city that will never come before this council, but where people are free to live day in, day out. Landlords can operate the properties in a poor manner, etc., etc. But ultimately, the properties that come to this committee are seeing a significant amount of investment in order to convert them into the properties that they're being converted into, and in my experience they become some of the most desirable, most aesthetically pleasing and most well managed properties that this city can see. Indeed, there are a significant number more legislative requirements upon HMOs and HMO management than there are on standard buy-to-lets. As many of us are acutely aware, recent increases in interest rates as well as legislative pressures have driven many landlords out of traditional buy-to-let ownership. This in turn has had an unavoidable impact on rents across the majority of property types and sizes, particularly in Portsmouth, it being such a densely populated city with a significantly higher than average level of rental properties. I also believe we're only at the start of this. For me, HMOs offer a significant level of solution of this problem. You will note from the planning officer's recommendation that they recommend for conditional approval of this application. Bike storage will undoubtedly be required as part of this application, and ultimately it is usual for it to be a planning requirement. I note that Councillor Swan assumed that the cycle storage would be in the rear garden, whereas actually this property does have a much larger than average front forecourt, which could also house the bike storage. It was also commented on that the clay waste pipe was within the property boundary. As standard practice for the conversion of these properties, we upgrade any and all incoming water supply and drainage within the confines of the property, with the exception of the main drain. For me, that is done in order to completely eliminate any concern over future-proofing of the drainage, any potential leaks, etc., and also any additional stress on very historic waste pipes. The objector, which is one of the neighbours of the property, also stated that you should consider the subdivided flats in the HMO count. Subdivided flats are not HMOs, and it's very clear in the directive that they're not to be included in the count. Portsmouth is a city which has a significant number of divided properties, and actually those properties are already counted within the count in terms of the number of properties within the location. According to statistics that we've previously obtained, only 7% of HMO tenants in Portsmouth have cars, which are significantly lower than the assumed level of car ownership taken into account in the report. Across our current portfolio of properties, car ownership is still significantly less than 10%. We heard earlier there'd be, including this property, there'd be 4.91% HMOs, which would be less than 50% of what is nationally deemed to represent a mixed and balanced community. So I would argue that without those HMOs, we don't currently have a mixed and balanced community. One of the points raised was around foxes in the garden. Firstly, we were made aware of this after we'd started the works of the property and after 50% of the garden had been cleared, but you would notice from the original plans that were put on the property, the aerial view, that the garden is significantly larger than average. Unfortunately, party wall agreements have been a protracted process due to one of the neighbours delaying it as long as possible so far, but we haven't seen the presence of the foxes over the last few weeks and months. We are, however, open to leaving the very rear of the garden as it is and fencing it off if the committee feels this would be sympathetic. Over half the garden has been cleared, and regardless of whether its planning is granted or not, I believe we're well within our rights to completely clear the garden if we wish to. I do not know of any example ever where any homeowner has been prevented from moving foxes on from their own garden. Yesterday I deputised in Southampton on a property that we're converting there. As many of you will know, the standards in the majority of cities in the country, including those 20 miles down the road, are significantly lower than the standards here. How is it then that we can have a committee who are due to make decisions based on their own exceptionally high standards and requirements, which are some of the highest in the country, but we then have calls from our own councillors to reject the applications because they only just exceed their already high standards? In my opinion, they either meet the standards or they don't. I believe one of the most important statements made in support of this application comes from Robert Neve, the council's expert on transport for planning. He states, "No traffic assessment has been provided. However, given the small scale of development, I am satisfied that the proposal would not have a material impact upon the function of the local highway network. Portsmouth City Council's parking standards, SPD, sets the level of off-road parking development for off-road parking facilities for new developments within the city and place a requirement of 2 off-road spaces for an HMO, which is also the same expected level of demand for a Class C3 dwelling, which would be the same. Therefore, this application is fully compliant with the HMO SPD, as well as the Article 4 Directive, PCS 20, and a significant number of other local and national policies. With regards to the work being carried out on this property, it is very important to know that all of the works are being carried out under permitted development. That is to say that none of the works that are being carried out require any planning permission whatsoever. It is simply the occupation of the property by 3 or more unrelated individuals that it requires planning permission. We've never had any noise complaints against any of our occupied properties, never had any incidents or accidents, never had the police called to any of our properties, and to the best of our knowledge, we've never had any examples of antisocial behaviour. We would be happy with the conditions that have been set out to be approved and recommended by the planning officer. No adverse comments have been noted from private sector housing, from the highways engineer, from the contaminated land team or any others. We operate in one of the most densely populated cities in Europe, and we currently have 4,322 HMOs. My business and others similar to ours are working extremely hard to deliberately convert suitable properties into brilliant HMOs. I accept that there are a number of properties that are existing HMOs within this city, typically those that are flat-fronted near the university, which are significantly smaller, do not have 10-metre square bedrooms, and are very undesirable as HMOs and provide a low quality of accommodation. I would plead with the council to work with developers such as myself to ensure that we're able to convert quality properties that are suitable rather than those that already happen to have been HMOs since prior to November 2011 and therefore automatically allowed to be so. My final point is that as a contractor we hold a licensed waste carrier's licence, and any waste once occupation has occurred will be removed quickly and efficiently by our operatives. We also supply additional bins which we pay the council for the privilege. Thank you very much for listening to my deputation. I hope you take the comments on board.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Okay, members, I feel like, how long was that? I'm going to start. My understanding of 6 minutes is different to everybody else's, I think. I'm going to get time here. Okay, members, questions? Comments? Councillor Dent.
Just going to move the officer's report.
Let's hear Councillor Dent's.
It's basically that they seem very, very close. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Every single bathroom is exactly down to the nearest square centimetre. We have 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms down to the nearest square centimetre. Are these, well, actually take another 2 into that as well, so that's 6. They seem very, very tight. We are looking at basically my thumb, the square centimetre. It's minute. Are these going to be checked rigorously?
Well, we're sometimes told that we don't do planning by numbers. We do it by livable space.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Of course, we're on questions, aren't we?
We're on questions.
I've got ahead of myself.
Got ahead of yourself a little, but I think we know where you're heading, perhaps. Thank you, Councillor Dent. Do you have a question, Lee?
Well, I mean, the deputation for the agent points out that we have some of the strictest space standards, the highest space standards in the areas, so in the region, and that is true, you know. So if it really is, Councillor Dent, like Chair, like 4 centimetres over, it's still compared to many other places, it's still it's bigger than most, as it's been pointed out. That's a comment, really, isn't it? Isn't that true, Mr. Turner?
Do you agree with me?
Well, since they meet the standards, whether it's by a whisker or by a lot.
And we see the living room on here, don't we? We see it.
I'm watching World Athletics Championships and people are winning gold medals between gold and silver is 4/100ths of a second. I'm just being flippant there, but there we are.
Margins, okay. All right. Comments?
Yes, I'll move the officer's report. There is absolutely no reason not to put this through. We've heard all the arguments in the previous case. It's not possible to just conjure up wishful thinking and wishful policies and pretend that we can just ignore the national planning policy framework and our own local policies. It's just not possible. So, yes, I'll move the officer's report.
Councillor Smith, you're seconding. Thank you. I mean, it's, you know, I just remind everybody that we are tasked with applying material planning considerations to these applications, and regardless of what we might otherwise think of HMOs more generally. We need HMOs in the city for people to live in. So we have a motion on the table. Is there anything else from anybody else?
There was one thing, Mr. What's his name again? What's your name again? I've forgotten.
Mr. Hill.
Hill, that's it, Mr. Hill. How can you forget? Going upwards. The licensing, he raised concern about the bad HMOs. Of course, the new licensing regime coming in will look at that and have an impact upon it. And you're quite right, the stuff that you do produce is worthy consideration always as very high standard.
Okay. Members, unless there is anything else, I think we need to vote on this application. Those in favour of moving the officer's recommendations? Okay, and against? And abstentions? Thank you.
Planning permission is therefore granted.
Thank you, Juliet. Bewley Road is our next application.
I'm terribly sorry. I don't mind missing it, but I need to pop downstairs.
Do you need a comfort break?
Yes, if that's what it's called.
Oh, thank you. Anybody else? Oh.
You want to carry on? You can carry on if you want.
Do this?
You carry on, but I need to pop downstairs.
Okay,
You can do without me, I'm
right,
sure.
Sorry? I think we've by accident rather than design, we're having a 5-minute. Karen, thank you. We're going to have a 5-minute. Okay, I'm sure that's been 5 minutes, isn't it? Okay, members, I know that the bingo call-in is back. So, the rest of the programme is agenda item 7, followed by 9, 7, 9, 4, 8, 10, and 11. Okay, so that is Oriel, Northern, Bewley, Belgravia, Magdala, and Fitzherbert Spur. Okay, well that's where we're at the moment. Okay, are we on? We're on? Okay, well, that's agenda item 7, Simon. Sorry to change the order. Oriel.
Thank you, Chairman. 76 Oriel Road. Like the last application, this is an application for change of use from a C3 dwelling house to a remaining in C3 dwelling house or a small HMO class C4 to enable that interchangeable use without the need for further planning permission for a period of 10 years. Oriel Road up in the northwest part of the city in Hillsley Ward. You can see the application site, mid-terrace, identified with the red edge. Application property in the middle with a small forecourt. The HMO data count, currently there are 3 HMOs within a 50-metre radius. Next door, and 2 others on the same road. The application would take this up, if approved, to 4 out of 70 properties, which is a figure of 5.64%, below the 10% policy threshold. Existing property, typical terraced house with the rear outrigger and some form of rear extension already, rear structure. This application would, like the others, construct a rear dormer and a rear ground floor extension under permitted development rights to enable the property to be large enough to accommodate up to 6 unrelated adults living together as a small HMO C4. The accommodation has a bedroom with ensuite at the front, a room labelled as a study, or any other sort of communal living use behind that, a ground floor communal shower room, and then the kitchen dining room. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms, each with a ensuite shower room, a tank room or extra storage just popped in there, and then 2 bedrooms, each with their own ensuite in the roof space. The configuration and individual space standards of the rooms and the overall configuration of the property, I should say, deemed acceptable by officers, exceeding all the minimum space standards and providing a general satisfactory disposition of size and layout. The application's come to committee because of 12 objections, and I believe a call-in from Councillor Weems, who has noted the study may be turned into a bedroom, the ground floor study, and wishing to raise the matter of parking. And we have deputations possibly from Councillors Weems and Simpson. And then, referring again to Councillor Weems's objection received overnight in the Appendix 1 of the Supplementary Matters Report, the SMAT, the comments are of objection. The application's sole role is to maximise occupancy. There may be multiple comings and goings at all hours. The addition of several vehicles to already congested roads. Large-scale HMOs can attract incidents of illicit activity, such as drug dealing. The impacts must be considered on the community. Councillor Weems is not against responsible landlords who comply with standards, nor does he condone poorly behaved tenants. What is needed is a balanced approach. This is not an objection to the existence of an HMO, it's to the extent of these developments. The real issue is the scale at which they're being pursued, with properties not truly suiting the numbers of proposed occupiers. Officers' responses on the matter of occupancy, maximising that, would refer you to the space standards. This application meets those space standards, and any other subjective overall view of the overall configuration of the property. Comings and goings, not necessarily proven in officers' opinion that there are more comings and goings, nor at different hours than compared to a Class C3 dwelling house. Parking and congested roads, again, not necessarily resulting an HMO in more vehicles than with a Class C3 dwelling house. Illegal activities, again, not necessarily related to HMO use, and nor are non-HMO uses necessarily free of people who may conduct illegal activities. The interaction with landlords and their responsibilities, the licensing regime is where the fit and proper test for landlords is engaged, not the planning system. And lastly, again, the general comments about scale and extent of conversions in terms of the numbers. We have the 10% policy threshold. This application complies with that threshold, it's under the threshold, and it more than complies in terms of minimum space standards with the configuration and size of the property and the rooms. Hence recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Russell.
Thank you, Chair. In the last two planning committees, I've been here to talk about HMOs in this area, Oriel and Shadwell Road. How is that? How is it that there's been so many times, but yet the 10% threshold has still not been met? How is it that we aren't completely aware of the amount of HMOs in this area? Why do we not include flats into this equation? This week, number 1 Oriel Road was approved for a conversion to 4 flats. How can that not be included? It will add more cars and people to an already crammed area that's having HMOs approved each month. I have spoken to many residents on this application, including Henry Thorpe, that has been lobbying about HMO reform for years. And if this application cannot be refused today, it should at least be deferred due to the crime that's plagued this area since HMOs have been present. Stabbing, drug dens and arrests have been common for HMOs in this road. This is a material planning consideration and is never properly assessed. The police reports are there. So can I request the planning committee to defer this application, look at the crime rate and obtain an assessment of the crime? This is unusual. As I said previously, our own data proves HMOs increase noise, nuisance and ASB. Let's act on the information given to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Carry on.
This application is for a change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to dual use Class C3, C4 house and multiple occupation. All the bedrooms meet or exceed 10 square metres. The required communal area for 6 persons when all bedrooms meet the 10 square metres is 22.5, and this property provides 27.81. All of the bedrooms additionally benefit from a shower room. The property additionally provides a home working space at 11.03 on the ground floor. This application fully complies with policy PCS 17, PCS 20 and PCS 23 of the local plan, and also complies with the Housing Multiple Occupation Supplementary Planning document. The Plan Officers recommend this fully compliant application for approval today, and I ask you all to fully support this recommendation, saving the time and cost involved for all in taking this to appeal. When you were discussing costs awarded earlier in the room, I feel it's also important for you all not only to consider if costs are sought and allowed by the Inspectorate, but also the impact in time and cost to an already stretched planning department in having to defend a fully compliant application at appeal. I feel planning department have made massive inroads at getting through these applications and moving on in the way in which they're dealing with applications. And for you guys as committee members, refusing fully compliant applications just places more pressure on the department. So I would urge you to take that into consideration when making decisions also. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Simon, can you help us out around the material planning considerations and criminality, which is what I heard?
Yeah. Touched on this earlier, that there is some data about antisocial behaviour and how some HMOs may have generally a high instance of that sort of behaviour. But the data doesn't seem to be so strong, the data that we've seen, to make that connection with each and every application. And as we said in one of the previous applications, you don't need to live in an HMO to be someone who carries a knife or is subjected to that sort of problem, or to take drugs or deal in drugs. You could live in a C3 dwelling house or in an HMO or anywhere else. So to draw such unequivocal parallels is very difficult, and it would have to be, so carefully supported by data for it to hold any weight. So although we do look at the matter in the round, and do acknowledge there are some issues, there can be some issues of antisocial behaviour, but even there, you can't assume that every HMO will have such behaviour by any means. I'm sure it's not suggested that every HMO would do that, but so it's a question of the degree and strength of the data to try and find that as a reason that might be compelling in which to withhold or planning permission or to refuse it.
Thank you. It's just helpful to talk that through. Members' questions? Councillor Dent?
Yeah, just a couple. The size of the study, I can just about see it now. It seems strange that basically they've all got en suites. The study seems to have an ensuite as well. Is this going to be turned into another bedroom? That's one point. And the other point is you've got a WC and a shower room that's got a WC in it, leading directly into the kitchen area. Is that correct? I assumed there had to be a panel in between the two.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sorry, this has come up before, a shower or toilet directly into the kitchen dining room, and I can't remember the answer, I'm afraid, but I'm 99.9% sure that the applicant would not show it if it were in contravention of, for example, the building regulations. So I believe that to be the case. Otherwise, the study doesn't have an ensuite off it. The shower room is between, well, it's off, it's at the the top end of the kitchen dining room. So the study doesn't have a toilet facility directly off it, just to clarify that point.
That actually wasn't quite the point I was actually making. The fact that all rooms have got en suites. So why is there a separate shower room alongside the study? Is the study going to be turned into another bedroom?
Yeah. We don't know. The chances are that this is the normal pattern, that may indeed happen in due course, but that's not what is in front of the Planning Committee. The application here is for a flexible C3, C4 consent with a study.
Okay, thank you. Members, any comments? I feel there are no reasons to do anything other than move the officer's recommendation for this application. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Vallely? Any other views, comments, thoughts? Okay, those in favour of moving the officer's recommendation? Against? Abstentions? Thank you.
Planning permission is granted.
Thank you, Julia. Okay. Item agenda 9, Northern Parade.
So, Chris, you've got through about 5 applications while I've been out. Is that right?
We've adjusted the running order. Just hold tight and we'll get there. We're now, so Northern Parade. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, which item's next? Northern Parade?
Northern Parade. Item agenda 9.
This is an application of 57 Northern Parade for a change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to a 7-person house in multiple occupation. It's come to the Planning Committee due to a call-in from Councillors Simpson and Weems. Councillor Simpson, I'm not aware there was a reason given. Councillor Weems on the matter of parking. I should start with an apology for the typo in the report around the HMO data count. I can't really explain it apart from just being human error in that paragraph 8.8 in the SMAT here has an incorrect reporting of the percentage of HMOs with a 50-metre radius. To be very clear, there is presently one HMO out of 24 properties, which equals 4.17%, not the stated much smaller figure. If granted planning permission, the proposed development would mean 2 HMOs out of 24, which equals 8.33, which is still below the policy threshold of 10. Councillor Weems' objection concerns about maximising occupancy, the comings and goings at all hours of residents, the addition of vehicles to congested roads, illicit activities such as drug dealing. These impacts must be considered. Councillor Weems is not against responsible landlords who comply with standards, nor does he condone poorly behaved tenants. What is needed is a balanced approach. The concern is not an objection to the existence of HMOs, but to the extent of these developments. The real issue is the scale at which they are being pursued, with properties not truly suiting the numbers of occupiers proposed. So in terms of occupancy, the application, I'll come back to the plans in a minute, complies with the standards. With respect to comings and goings at different hours, don't believe there's any evidence to suggest that is the case so differently from a normal dwelling house. In respect to parking, again, not convinced that there is sufficiently different parking patterns with a small HMO, or indeed a large HMO, and a C3 dwelling house. The same with illegal activities. With respect to landlords, the licence regime is the correct regime to engage with the fit and proper test that landlords are subject to. And otherwise, we're referring back again to the 10% threshold and the individual circumstances of this property with respect to its layout. So sorry, I should have done this first. Onto the property, 57 Northern Parade, backing on to Alexandra Park. It has a side, one of those rear garage tracks serving the backs of all the properties. I understand the garage that was there has been knocked down and there's some sort of carport arrangement now, but that would be providing bicycle access more easily than through the property. There is the property on the front there, the bus stop outside. The rear of the property, the redevelopment involved at the rear. I understand these have been completed, a rear extension, replacing and upgrading the conservatory, and a rear roof extension. One can see already a few permitted development dormers, perhaps of smaller size. But those are the permitted development proposals. There's the data count. I'm sorry, I don't know why that's covering some of the properties. Those are all not showing HMOs. Yeah, apologies. The existing property is already identified as an HMO. I do apologise. That because of its existing C3, C4 consent in place, set out in the report. So actually, I do apologise. The percentages would not change. So 4.2% existing, and that's is how it would remain. I do apologise. Onto the layout of the property. There's the existing property with the front lounge and major living accommodation to the rear, bedrooms upstairs, and conversion already of upper story bedrooms. This is the restructured property to the rear, the bedroom and ensuite, bedroom ensuite at the rear, and kitchen dining area. The plans, just for completeness, the plans in the report didn't have the furniture layout which we asked for, and so they've appeared now since publication to give everyone a better opportunity to see how the rooms could be laid out. Upstairs, we have an ensuite bedroom, an ensuite bedroom. This bedroom has no ensuite, but there is a communal shower room there at the front, and then upstairs the two rooms have their ensuites, and there's some form of tank room as well. With respect to sizes, the bedrooms are all a very good size as it happens. You can just see by eye how large the bedrooms are, even with en-suites in them. So the property would easily exceed the bedroom sizes in all of them, some by just a little bit, but most of them by some way. And also the communal kitchen dining area would exceed the minimum standard also. So on that basis, officers are happy to recommend approval. There are no representations from neighbours, and we had the call in from Councillors Simpson and Weems. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. I was surprised to see this application, considering it was given permission in February this year to be a 6-bedroom HMO. Who are we kidding, though? There's a perfectly good lounge next to the kitchen diner that can be made into a 7th bedroom and, of course, increases the quality of accommodation for all who live there. As I've mentioned on multiple occasions, this is just pure greed. While I'm not a fan of HMOs, a 6-bedroom HMO at least had a lounge to offer the tenants. Now they have just their bedroom. This is bedroom 7, by the way, if you want to look at it. This application is very similar to the one on Fairburn Road, which was refused, as it is another attempt of adding another bedroom where previously a lounge had been permitted. This room will be next to the kitchen diner, so when people wake up, commune, cook, wash, the poor tenant who is lumbered with this room will have to hear, smell and be disturbed. We shouldn't be encouraging it. There has to be a line of what is good accommodation beyond the required spaces. While it might only be councillors that have brought this forward today, I can assure you the parking impact will be great, as it's double yellow lines and bus stop out the front, Northern Parade. Therefore, it'll leave the back of the building to a potential 7 more cars that have to mount the council green spaces, as well as obstruct residents' garages, which is already an issue in the area. Why are these never properly assessed? Instead, I quote from the officer, "No traffic assessment has been provided. However, given the small scale of development, I am satisfied the proposal would not have a material impact on the local highway network." How many times have we heard this? It's just laziness. Clearly a traffic assessment is required, and I would implore the committee to request one. It's within your rights to do so. I think this application should be refused based on poor layout and lack of assessment due diligence from transport planning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, 57 Northern Parade. All the bedrooms in this property do exceed 10 square metres, and the required communal area for 7 persons when all bedrooms meet the 10 square metres is 22.5. This particular property provides 26.08, again exceeding the requirement. And again, additionally, all the bedrooms benefit from a shower room, which exceeds the requirement of 2 shower rooms for the property. The property also benefits from rear access, allowing a cycle store to be accessed from the rear garden, which again is a plus point for this property. I feel I have to point out that repeated accusations towards people living in HMOs as being more capable of drug taking and stabbings than someone living in a family home shows complete bias and would not be the type of tenant attracted by any of the properties on the agenda today. My daughter lives in a HMO herself and she would strongly refute any of these views. Her fellow tenants are all professional people with respected job roles and she lives in her home happily. The application has a previously approved C4 use, so in reality today you are considering the addition of one person as the property can currently lawfully be used for 6 persons. The application fully complies with policy PCS 17, PCS 20 and PCS 23 of the local plan and also complies with the Housing Multiple Occupation Supplementary Planning document. The planning officer has recommended this fully compliant application for approval today and I ask you all to fully support this recommendation, saving the time and cost involved for taking this to appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions?
So is it right then we've swapped out a kitchen and separate dining room in favour of a bedroom number 7, leaving what we see 4 table and chairs and a 3-seater settee, I suppose. Is that right, Mr. Turner?
Just need a moment to turn up the approved plans from previously.
Yeah, it's on there. It's on page 68, but it'd be nice to have them on the screen as well. I hope I'm on the right report.
No, you are. I just need to look at the approved plans from previously.
Yeah, sure.
Lee, if you could pop your microphone off. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor, you're correct. What was shown as an extra lounge is now bedroom 7. That was under the C3, C4 consent.
Comments? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
It is unmitigated greed by developers, but unmitigated greed from developers is approved of by the government. And therefore it doesn't appear that we have a justifiable reason that would to turn this down that would survive an appeal. And I just think if we did, we are fooling residents into saying that our decision will stick. All the rooms are bigger than required. There is access from the rear, there is parking, potentially parking space at the rear as well. So with regret, I'm going to propose that we accept this.
Thank you.
So I slightly agree with Councillor Vernon Jackson, but I'm going to propose refusal because it's this combination of the kitchen and the diner that we've seen previously, which Councillor Simpson mentioned in his deputation, and we refused it because the communal area was not a sufficient size. If you'd reduce it by, it looks by about a third to a half. So it turns out, I think, so about half. So it goes down to about the real communal space where they sit down, have their dinner, relax, or I know they can watch TV in their rooms, but they get together. It comes down to about 10 or 12 square metres. I haven't got a slide rule with me, but that's what's happened in effect. They've nearly halved the communal space from last time. And I'm not satisfied that's correct. As a member of this local planning authority, I want to protect the future intended occupiers and their residential amenities. So on those grounds, I think that the communal space is insufficient. The configuration of the proposed kitchen and diner proposed as communal space is not appropriate. The configuration of the kitchen means that is a kitchen area. It's not communal space, and the communal space is much reduced from last time to about, I don't know, 10 metres squared at best. So I want to refuse it on those grounds. The previous application was much better.
Thank you. Okay. Gerald?
Sorry, just one. The report that we have in front of us says the communal kitchen dining area, so the communal room, is 26.08 square metres against a standard that people have to get to of 22.5 square metres. So the report says that it is already significantly larger than the standard that we ask for. I just don't understand how we're going to support an appeal saying there isn't enough communal space when it's significantly larger than what the standards the council asks for.
Yes, what the report says and what I think are completely different. I don't accept that a kitchen is communal space. I never have done, and we've seen so many where they create a galley kitchen, for example. This isn't quite a galley kitchen, but I don't accept, I mean, you've got a door there, people walking through it and so on. So it is not, in my opinion, communal space, and I've stuck to that for a very long time. I'm not going to change my mind now. They've reduced the communal space by about 2/3, which was not necessary, and therefore they will have an adverse impact on the residential amenities of future intended occupiers by not meeting, in my opinion, our communal space standards. So that's why that's a proposition that I've made.
Indeed. We
Chair, did anyone second?
No, we haven't got a second to free the proposal yet. We haven't got that yet.
Sorry, Chair. I'll second Councillor Vernon Jackson's proposal.
We have a seconder now, Julia. Councillor Dent.
And I'll second Councillor Hunt.
Okay, two proposals, both been seconded. Any other comments, views, Simons, coming in?
Just to assist, just to make sure members realise we shouldn't be comparing the previous consent to this one. This one stands or fails on its own merits.
I think Juliet will agree. I've made that quite clear. I just happened to mention the previous one in passing. It doesn't need to form a personal form of words. And I just checked PO2 ODX. I can't find any stabbing in there last year that was mentioned in the previous deputation.
Juliet, were you happy with Councillor Hunt's?
We're voting on Councillor Vernon Jackson's motion first, aren't we?
Yeah.
And then I think Simon can go through some wording if we move on to the other proposal.
All right, okay. Unless there's anything else, we have two proposals. You're like...
Chair, I was simply going to make a comment, but I wasn't sure whether I should be doing it at this moment or after the vote, so
do it now. Why not now? Seize the moment.
I will seize the moment. So I think no one is happy sometimes about passing these applications, and although the proposer is saying that these are high quality places, they may be higher quality than other places that people live in, and they may be well executed within their size. We're all fundamentally reacting to the fact that they are small. What I liked about this one, and I recall one of the previous ones we rejected was because we had the living area and a conservatory separated. This at least is one integral whole, and I also noticed that this is the first property where I've actually believed that cyclists could actually use the cycle store and use their bike to get out. So because that eliminates at least one of the issues about living in such a tight space, I am likely to support it.
Thank you. Okay, well, we have two proposals. So Councillor Vernon Jackson and Smith's motion to move the officer's recommendations. Those in favour? Against? And I think that's it.
Planning permission is therefore granted.
Thank you everybody. Bewley Road is next, if you're keeping up with the running order.
Thank you, Chairman. It's an application for 52 Bewley Road, Copner Ward. Change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to a 7-person house in multiple occupation, an HMO. Bewley Road is approximately midway between, it's in the middle of the island there, with Copner Road to the east and London Road to the west. It's approximately halfway along the Laburnum Road there, just to the north. That's Laburnum Road running east-west, and there's the property towards the northern end of Bewley Road, mid-terrace property. There it is with a small front garden and bay windows, etc. That's the property to the rear, with a conservatory lean-to that would actually be removed, and I should say rebuilt and under permitted development, so forming a new flat roof rear extension there to replace the existing conservatory, and a rear roof extension. Existing property, not one of the ones with a rear wing, sort of a larger oblong type shape, mixture of rooms at ground floor and upper floor. So the proposal is for 7 bedrooms, single occupancy, i.e. 1 person per bedroom. It's one of these nice wide hallways with an extra window on the front, therefore. Front bedroom with ensuite. Rear bedroom with ensuite, and then the communal kitchen diner with a tank room off that as well. The communal kitchen diner just exceeds the minimum size standards, as do the bedrooms, mostly just passing the 10 square metres, 1 or 2 slightly bigger. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms, 1 with an ensuite there, 1 with an ensuite at the rear there, and this bedroom doesn't have an ensuite but has access across the way to a shared shower room, and the 2 rooms in the extended roof space, both with their own ensuite. So we don't seem to have the, unless I've skipped it by mistake. Oh, we do. Here we are. The data count. Presently 3 properties as HMOs in the area. The application site is there, so there's 1 to the south, 1 opposite on the same road, and 1 to the north on the Burnham Grove. The addition of this one, if approved, will take it to 4, which is 7.7% within the policy threshold. So on the 2 principal points of imbalanced, whether or not there's an imbalance in the local community, and with respect to the size and configuration of the property, planning officers are able to recommend approval. We have had 32 objections on the range of matters set out in front of you, and a call in from Councillor Weems on the matter of parking. The 32 objections I should add included from Councillors Swan and Weems. And we're on 52 Bewley Road, aren't we? And we have the SMAT objection from Councillor Weems, which I'll take you through again. Concern out about occupancy levels, multiple residents coming and going at all hours, addition of vehicles to congested roads, large HMOs attracting incidents of illicit activities such as drug dealing. The impacts must be considered on the community. Councillor Weems is not against responsible landlords who comply with standards, nor does he condone poorly behaved tenants, but what is needed is a balanced approach. There's no objection from Councillor Weems to the existence of this or other HMOs. It is to the extent of these developments. The real issue is the scale at which they're being pursued, with properties not truly suiting the numbers of proposed occupiers. On that last point of the scale of the property, which is also the first point, as set out in the report, the room sizes comply and the overall configuration is deemed acceptable, and it is below the 10% threshold. So on those two principal matters, officers are able to recommend consent. And then in terms of comings and goings of residents, vehicle parking, any illegal activities, none of those things are clearly, demonstrably different between an HMO and a Class C3 dwelling house. So again, officers are still able to recommend approval of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Mr. Russell, welcome.
Thank you.
Are you ready for your deputation?
I am, yes.
Good, okay.
And thank you for delaying it. I was supposed to be first by all accounts, but it got put back, and I'm grateful for that because all the sort of things that I would have liked to have said have already been brought up. So that's been a great help. With reference to the map there of the two HMOs in Bewley Road, they may have HMO status, but they're both lived in by just single families. I've lived in Bewley Road for 54 years, right? And I don't believe that any of the houses have even been turned into flats. So an HMO, to me, 7-bed, is totally out of context. In 1984, next door, 52, had a fire. An old lady lived in the upper part, and her niece and her son lived in the lower part. The house was completely gutted. We only suffered smoke damage, fortunately, and unfortunately the old lady actually died from her burns. When the house was done up, apparently there was not enough insurance money to do it up properly, so it was a bit of a make and mend job from what I can make out. The guy that was living there was he was a nurse at QA, and always worked nights, him and his wife. Unfortunately, she left him and went back to Portugal, so he took in other nurses. So there was always 3 or 4 people living in there. I was totally surprised because I didn't know that he'd sold the place. My wife and I came back from a holiday in Torquay in February to find the front was being painted. The windows, which were obviously put in 1984, were being taken out and put back in. Obviously, they put something behind them. And it was given a lick of paint, which you probably saw from the picture that was up there. Also, it had solar panels put on the roof. Now, a builder who lives along the road from me explained to me what would happen when it was converted into an HMO. And to get the height in, the floors have to be taken out so that you can get enough space into the second floor. So why would you want to put a cat lick of paint on the front of a house and put solar panels on it when they'll all have to come down when they gut it. That confuses me. I don't understand that. The other thing I have to, being a good neighbour to him, when he was working nights, I often put his bins out for him at the front. I don't think that you can get through to the front door with 14 bins in the front, and on the day when they actually collect the rubbish, you're going to block the pavement completely when you put them all out the front. The bike business, I mean, I think that's just for the Greens, isn't it? I ride a bike, always have done, but I certainly wouldn't want to wheel it all the way through my house to put out in the back garden. My daughter actually lives in Southsea, and she says that HMOs have become like a cancer. She's actually moving to Gosport to get away from it all. What I don't understand is that, okay, we need more housing, but why is there so much commercial property not being used? QuickSave in North End has been an eyesore for more than 20 years. Nothing's ever been done about it. You've got Baltic House down by the Rudmore roundabout. You've got the police station. You've got the banks. None of them have been touched. To me, we shouldn't be doing all this, especially in a residential road, because what you're doing is you're actually taking away the ethos. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Russell, thank you for your time and thank you for waiting. And, you know, with regret, lots of those issues are not for this committee to consider, but I'm sure as elected members we're mindful of all of those things. We need to move on to the next deputation. Carry on.
52 Bewley Road. So in this property, all the bedrooms meet or exceed the 10 square metres. The communal area is 23.10, and all the bedrooms benefit from a private shower room. This is a 7-bedroom application for single occupancy only. Picking up on the bins, the requirement is for 2 bins only, but 360 litres, which is a larger bin for residents of 7-bedroom HMOs, and these can be accommodated within the forecourt. The comments made on the previous application about small rooms, I just wanted to sort of stress that rooms over 10 square metres are not small rooms. The national standard and the size of many HMO bedrooms in this city are just 6.5 square metres. 10 square metres, 11 square metres, I think there's 12 and a half in this particular property, are large bedrooms which would, you know, provide a lot of space to the resident. Sit and relax, watch TV. All the stress is taken a little bit more from the communal area. Also, as the resident highlighted in his objection, 2 of the highlighted HMOs in the radius are in fact family homes. So there is a low percentage stated of HMOs in the area. So it could be argued there's a clear need for this type of housing within the area for people who cannot afford their own private houses. The planning officer has recommended this fully compliant application for approval today, and I ask you to fully support this recommendation. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Members. Councillor.
Yeah, Mr. Turner, I'm looking at the communal space standards again, and I'm going to continue to be very tight on this because I think it's only right for the future intended occupiers. If you look at the plans, Mr. Turner, and you may agree with me or not, but the developer says it's 23.07, or the owner says 23.07, is that right? Yes. All right. So here's my argument. You look at the kitchen and you take into account the units in the kitchen. I've had more time to look at this one than just now. So if you add up all the units of the kitchen, I've fitted quite a number of kitchens. Each one of those units is going to be 600 millimeters deep by 500 millimeters wide. A couple of those units are 1,000 millimeter units. But if you divide them all down into 0.5 meters square, because I'm being kind here, down to half a meter square, you arrive at something like 6 meters squared of the so-called communal space taken up by units, fridge units, kitchen units, cupboards and so on. Now, if you were to take that 6 metres out of the so-called communal space, would we achieve the communal space that the city requires as a standard?
I didn't 100% follow everything in there, but what I can say is this committee's guidance is the HMO SPD, and it doesn't go into anything like that sort of detail. It simply says a combined living space for 6 or more people, if all the bedrooms are more than 10 square metres, is 22.5 square metres. It doesn't seek to go beyond that in terms of details. Members, the local planning authority, can still take a view on the configuration of the room as well as the size. In this instance, this looks fairly straightforward and therefore usable in its configuration. And in terms of the size, as I say, it is beyond or above the minimum size standard. So to answer your question, Councillor, no, I can't break it down, and I wouldn't recommend that either.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Simon, at the HMO count, there is a difference between ones that are definitely HMOs and ones that we think we are. But as I understand it, you're counting both of those as if they're, all of those together as if they're HMOs. Is that correct?
Yeah, we err on the side of caution, and if we're not sure, we will still include them.
Okay, that's really helpful to know. Thank you.
Comments, members? Lee?
Yeah, I'm going to move to refuse. Members, we're being fooled here, once again, over communal space standards. We really are being fooled because developers are coming along and they're claiming that kitchens are part of the communal space standards. Even if that were the case, if you measure out the units that are sat there, you cannot be communal inside an oven or a fridge unit or what have you. Those units sit on about 6 metres squared of the so-called communal space. It is a kitchen. The configuration means that this is the communal space has been compromised by the kitchen. If you actually look at it and draw a few lines, you can see that the actual communal space area is reduced to about, and I'm being kind, 10.5 to 10 metres squared. So in my opinion, it does not meet communal space standards that we require for future intended occupiers, and I won't be moved on it because I'm not a fool. I know exactly what's going on. This is being used to this is being created to fit the so-called communal space standards. Now, we might think kitchens are a communal area. I happen to think that they're not a communal area. It's not a clever place to hold meetings in with people cooking and frying and goodness knows what else. It is not a communal space area, and I won't change my mind on that. The planning inspector previously has agreed with us in some of these rejections. I'm not pleading my case. I'm simply saying that in my opinion, we're being fooled. We've seen a couple of applications where the communal space standard was clearly communal space, but in the last couple of applications, we have seen it combined with a kitchen. I've made my argument, and I shall leave it where it is.
Thank you, Lee. Gerald, first.
Thank you. I have a great deal of sympathy for Councillor Hunt's view, but I think the adopted policy of the Council is that kitchens are a communal space, and that is what is in the local plan and in the SPD around HMOs. So my reading of the policy is clear, but of course it's all down to each of us individually to make our own decisions on that. I think it would seem sensible as part of the local plan that we look to be more specific about what communal space means in relation to HMOs and what is included and what isn't, so that everybody can know what the rules are. But as I see this today, this doesn't. I don't like HMOs. I wish the government would give us powers to turn them down, but the government don't give us powers to turn them down, and therefore I can see no reason that is justifiable to a planning inspector to say no to this, and therefore I will move the officer recommendation for approval.
Councillor Candlish.
I had a question still, which is...
Sorry, Peter.
Which is actually to push a little bit further into what Councillor Hunt was asking. So when we look at the kitchen dining area, and it says 20... I can't quite read it on the screen. I think it's 27 something. Does that 27 refer to the white unmarked area in there, or does it also include the units? That must be a yes or no question.
It is the room size, the total room size.
So that wasn't a yes or no. So to make sure I understand, therefore it includes the... Okay, thank you.
Can I ask, sorry about this, it's arising out of what Councillor Vernon Jack says, and it might change my mind. I mean, can I ask the planning officer or even the legal officer, I beg your pardon, I've missed this, and I'm reasonable about this kind of stuff. Do we have a policy that says kitchens are part of the communal area, or are we silent on that? Oh, he's nodding his head.
Yes, so the combined living space in the SPD is defined as a single, typically open plan space, usually containing a kitchen, dining area, living area, laundry, utility. So it's combined kitchen and living.
All right then, well, Councillor Vernon Jackson's suggestion that we look at this to better define what communal space is better, but I'll stick to my guns for the time being.
Okay. All right. Well, we haven't got a seconder for either of the proposals. Councillor Smith.
And Councillor Vernon Jackson, thank you.
And I'm going with Mr. Hunt.
Okay. Anything else, members? Okay. Councillor Vernon Jackson, Councillor Smith's proposal to move the officer's recommendations. Those in favour? Against? Okay, thank you. I think that's it.
Planning permission is granted.
Thank you, Juliet.
May I ask, Chair?
Of course.
Could it be entered into the minutes that there was a suggestion from Councillor Vernon Jackson that we look at the local plan to define better what communal space, well, to look at communal space to see if that needs to be adjusted? Is that all right? Thank you, and it's very timely, of course.
And Chairman, I'm also conscious that I'm Cabinet Member for Transport, and there has been over time concern expressed over the transport comments that come to this committee. I'd be very happy to see if we could set up a meeting for members of this committee, not as a formal meeting, decision-making meeting, but to meet with people in transport who do those comments, for people to be able to put their concerns to them, to see if we can address things, because they're not here to hear any of this. And if we can try to improve things, I'd be very happy to set that up if members would wish.
I mean, that's a really good idea, because I'm mindful of the deputation made by Mr. Was it Tan? And he said there was a borough, I think it was a London borough that he talked about, said the developer should not expect to win planning permission if the street, if the parking in the street, whether it's true or not, I have no idea, but he did mention that developers won't get planning permission if the on-street parking or the street parking is already oversubscribed, which sounds a bit odd to me, but maybe it's London, but there we are. But it is worth looking at, isn't it?
Okay, all right. Councillor Vernon Jackson, you go away and sort that out. Belgravia. Well, you know, you have all these, you know, fancy jobs. Good.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a planning application for 47 Belgravia Road, with a change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to a 7-person house in multiple occupation, an HMO. It's come to the Planning Committee due to the number of objections, 15, and at the request of Councillor Weems on the matter of parking. This, like Bewley Road, is just south of Laburnum Grove, which runs east-west across the middle of the city. This is at the eastern end of Laburnum Grove, closer to Copner Road. But here we are on Belgravia, so it's the property mid-terrace there in the red edge. This property here with the scooter motorbike, small front garden. With respect to the data count, there are no HMOs, no known HMOs or suspected HMOs in the 50-metre radius. So approving this planning application would provide one, which would be a figure of 1.5%. Traditional terraced arrangement with 2 main rooms in the main body of the house and the rear wing, with 3 bedrooms upstairs. The application is to, the building is to extend at the rear using the prior approval consent outside this planning permission, and to convert and extend the loft again outside of this planning application. To provide a bedroom here with ensuite, another bedroom with ensuite on the ground floor, a communal toilet on the ground floor, and then the kitchen dining area. Then upstairs, bedroom with ensuite, bedroom with ensuite, bedroom with ensuite, and 2 more in the loft, bedrooms with ensuites. The space standards meet or exceed the minimum standards for the bedrooms and indeed for the communal kitchen dining area, and the overall configuration of the property is deemed to be acceptable, as well as the size. So on that basis, and the HMO count being the 2 principal matters, as well as the other taken into consideration, officers are able to recommend approval to the committee. We had Councillor Weems's objections set out to the 5 properties, including this one, set out in the SMAT at the end. Concerns about occupancy level, comings and goings at all hours, vehicles in already congested roads, adding them, large-scale HMOs attracting illicit activities. The impacts must be considered on the community. Councillor Weems is not against responsible landlords who comply with standards, nor does he condone poorly behaved tenants, but he does say we need a balanced approach. And then a concern about not so much the existence of HMOs, but as to the extent of these properties. The real issue is the scale at which they're being pursued, with properties not truly suiting the numbers of proposed occupiers. In this instance, the data count suggests this would be the only HMO within the 50-metre radius, and so would comply with your policy threshold of 10% being 1.5%, and the bedrooms and other rooms would all comply with the space standards and the general disposition of the property, so officers are able to recommend approval. And then the matters of comings and goings raised by Councillor Weems, parking, illegal activities, etc. It's not abundantly clear that there is data that suggests the use of HMOs automatically leads to all or any of these things compared to family occupation of the dwelling that has already been or can already be extended in size. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Carry on.
Within this property, all of the bedrooms meet or exceed 10 square metres. The required communal area exceeds requirement at 23.82, and all of the bedrooms benefit from en-suite shower room. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of comments. So a kitchen is a requirement of a communal area, and no deception is trying to be made by putting the kitchen within this area. The open plan communal space can be used for kitchen dining. When licensing officers consider the application, they tend to see that when the larger bedrooms meet the 10 square metre plus, there's less room for the living requirement, so more focus is made from officers for the kitchen dining requirement at the ground floor level, as tenants tend to spend more time in their rooms, so generally just put a smaller sofa in these cases. Also, this application fully complies with policy PCS 17, PCS 20 and PCS 23 of the local plan. Within the 50 metre radius of this property, there are no other HMOs, so it can be argued there's a clear need for this type of property also within this area. The plan officer has recommended this fully compliant application for approval today, and I ask you to fully support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Turner, how many is this for? How many people is this intended for? 7. I wonder if you're looking at the kitchen area, and I don't wish to be cruel when I say fooled, but I think we are. When you look at the kitchen area, this kitchen is actually smaller than the other one because I put them up against each other. I mean, is that a double sink unit there?
Yeah, I mean, this is reasonably indicative, but they happen to have shown that, yeah.
Yeah, and then we've got an ordinary oven, presumably under a hob. It looks like a 4-ring hob. Would that be about right? Okay. And then we've got, well, a couple of cupboards and presumably a washing machine under there. Is there any utility in here? Is there a separate utility room here for washing machines or anything like that?
No, the first floor has the tank room, which so that takes, I think, some of the boiler space that might have traditionally been in the kitchen. That's out of the kitchen in the tank room.
Yeah.
But otherwise, there's an indicative kitchen layout that shows indicatively where the fridge, freezers, etc., could be, the washing machine, and so on.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Members? Comments?
No, we are being fooled. You look at this kitchen and think of your own kitchen. You've got, for 7 people, working people, presumably, who are busy people, they want to come down, prepare their food. You've got a tiny amount of workspace, maybe 1,000 millimetres, maybe worktop, maybe 2 metres of worktop, maybe 3 metres maybe at best. You've got 4 hobs and a double sink drainer. That's for a tiny home for a small family. Yeah, here we are thinking of putting in 7 people, or allowing 7 people to be put in here. This is not good enough, in my opinion. The kitchen is way too small for 7 people, and I think I'm quite convinced a planning inspector would agree with us. They have in the past, the configuration of it. If you want to put in a sofa into the so-called communal space, going to take up practically a third to a half of it. It's tiny, hardly room to stretch your legs. And then if you put a table to sit down and eat that food on, you're cramped, you're crammed. It is not sufficient. 22 metres squared of proper communal space would be. But I accept what our policy says. I accept that that's what the applicant's ridden in on. but I don't think it's good enough. So I'm going to move refusal because the kitchen is too small for the future intended occupiers, that it doesn't provide enough amenity for the future intended occupiers, and the communal space therefore is too small. Separately, I won't join those two together, but the configuration of the kitchen is not sufficient for the amenities of the future intended occupiers. It is a tiny kitchen.
Well, we've rehearsed this previously.
It's slightly different because
Well,
I'm actually mentioning the configuration of the kitchen and how the kitchen impacts on the lives of the people who intended to live there.
Yep, no,
Chair,
I accept that.
Chair, can I come in? I think licensing has specific standards for number of cookers and work surface areas, etc., in their policy. Is that right, Simon?
I was just thinking the same. I don't know the details, but they do have a lot of detailed standards for all the different rooms. So it wouldn't surprise me. I can't confirm that for sure, but all I can say is that I think it's likely, A, and B, just to return to the point, notwithstanding what Councillor Hunter said, the room does comply with our overall space standard.
The agent is nodding her head as well to confirm that.
Okay. All right. Councillor Dent.
One point on that with the communal space. I assume that the bike store will be at the rear of the property, which means they've got to go through that communal space and the kitchen to get it out. So that becomes even more of a, you're not going to get a sofa in there, you're not going to get a table in there. Basically, it's just an open space that is useless.
Are you seconding while you're on the mic? Okay. Simon, did you want can you confirm about the bike?
Yeah. Again, back to the premise, how differently occupied would this premises be from occupation as a dwelling house for a family? With respect to bikes, like many properties in Portsmouth, the only way into a backyard is through the house. My house is like that, and I have to push my bikes through. Not ideal, but that is the way it is, whether or not it's a C3 dwelling house or a class sui generis HMO. So I would just make the point that it's not material difference. You might have a family with 2 or 3 kids, each with a bike, and the family wants to go out on a Sunday for a bike ride together. You know, that's 4 or 5 bikes coming through the property. In any event, the planning inspectorate have given us their opinion, each on its own merits, different applications, but where they have seen similar scenarios like this, they have tended to note how pushing a bike through just lasts for a few seconds, the bike's out, people have got in and out of the way as necessary, and then again, people can settle down to using that room.
Thank you. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Yep, I am one of the people who has to push their bike through my kitchen to get out the front door. So this is not unusual to me. I'm sorry if the council has a policy which sets down what the space standards are. I'm sorry, I think we stick by that. If we want to change that, then we change it in the SPD and the local plan, and that is the place to do that. It might be that we need to do different wording or whatever, but I think it is important that if the council does have a policy, we try to stick to it. I don't like HMOs, but they are around. I'm stunned that in this area there is not a single another one within a 50-metre radius, which surprised me a great deal. But we do have rules, and I think our job, as well as everybody else's, is to stick to those rules. Otherwise, I think we look foolish, and it's just not. It won't be sustained at appeal. So I'm happy to move the officer recommendation that planning permission is given, because I can't see a reason which is legally sustainable to say no.
I think we're having a really useful debate today about this. It's very helpful. And I agree with you about that. But this time I've learnt from the previous application where I was talking, and I'm talking about the size of the kitchen and the configuration of the kitchen, and indeed with the, you can say you've got chips on the go or a frying pan, whatever, you go in there, you've got 2 or 3 people trying to cook their evening meal. on 4 hobs and somebody comes wheeling a cycle through, and that's really going to be great, isn't it? But anyway, I don't think, and this is a thinner property compared to the other one. It's not as wide. So I think the layout, the configuration of the kitchen, and so on. Just to add a bit more in, Mrs. Gill, to my proposal, is the configuration and the layout of the communal space has an adverse impact on the future intended occupiers of the property. So that's an amenity issue rather than focusing on the community space standards.
Okay. John.
Chair, I would second Councillor Vernon-Jackson for what has been said by him.
Thank you. Well, I think we're back at this situation where we have these 2 proposals. So we had Councillor Hunt's proposal first. We'll take that.
Yeah, is Simon content with the wording?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Those in favour of Councillor Hunt and Dent's proposal to refuse this planning application, those in favour of that? Against? Abstentions, I think we're there. Move on to the proposal to accept the officer's recommendations. Vernon-Jackson. Smith proposal, in favour? Against? Okay.
Planning permission is therefore granted.
Thank you, Juliet. Magdala Road.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at 7 Magdala Road for the change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to a 7-person house in multiple occupation, an HMO. This has come to the committee due to 14 objections from local residents. I should just update the committee that the rear dormer was not quite shown on the plans in the committee report, so that's been updated, is now shown correctly on the presentation plans you'll see in a moment. Otherwise, there was no update and no speaking, from objectors anyway. Here is the application property at the western end of Magdala Road, just with Cosham High Street, just running north to south, just out of shot to the west there. So it's on the edge of the town centre. There, it's a terraced property. This light grey one here, a small forecourt. Already some accommodation in the roof space. It's the 4th one along there. The rear element would be replaced as part of the approved GPDC larger home approval, and the roof will be extended under permitted development. With respect to the HMO data count, there are presently none in the 50-metre radius. So if approved, this application would bring the figure to 2.04%, below the policy threshold of 10%. Property is a good-sized property, as you can discern from the front elevation there. Nice bay windows, etc. Rectilinear, albeit with a rear wing as well. 3 large bedrooms upstairs. So the application is proposed to use it for 7 people. So we have the large hallway, double width, a front bedroom with ensuite, a rear bedroom with ensuite, and the kitchen diner, and a communal WC. Upstairs, bedroom with ensuite, and a third bedroom with ensuite, and the 6th and 7th bedrooms in the extended roof with ensuites. Kitchen communal dining area at over 29 square metres, easily exceeds the 22.5 expected from your standards. And the bedrooms, there's just one that just squeaks over the 10, otherwise they're 12, 13, 15, nearly 20 square metres. You can see it's the size of some of them with the large bay windows in a large house. So the standard of accommodation in terms of size and configuration is good. So on those two principal points, configuration and size of the accommodation and individual rooms and the data count, officers are able to recommend the application for approval. Thank you.
This particular property has been designed and project managed by Applecore. Upon occupation, the property will also be managed by Applecore Property Services. The neighbours will be fully informed of contact details, and any possible disruptions will be investigated promptly. To date, we've not had a single neighbour complaint from any of our managed properties. During the build process, we are keen to ensure as minimal disruption to neighbours as possible, and we're now working with the neighbours to keep noise to a minimum for certain periods, and have also removed a neighbour's wall free of charge. It's extremely important to us as a company to ensure as least possible disruption to residents as possible. The build will be completed in a timely manner, waste disposal by skips and scaffold kept up for the least possible time needed for the roof works. The property provides large bedrooms which significantly exceed 10 square metres. The required communal area for 7 persons is 22.5 square metres, and this property provides 29.34. Also, and there's also a further laundry utility room at 4.15 on the first floor, which totals 33.49 square metres of communal area, again far exceeding the requirement, and all of the bedrooms additionally benefit from an ensuite. This property, I know there's been some mentions about the cycles, has got a really good rear access, there's a wide alleyway to the rear, allowing cycles to be accessed and stored from the rear garden, and cycle storage will be provided. The property is in close proximity to QA Hospital, and there has been an increasing demand for high-quality accommodation for hospital workers within walking and cycle distance of the hospital due to lack of parking at the hospital. For this property, we already have a room inquiry confirmed for a pharmacist currently based at QA, subject to a positive outcome today. The application fully complies with policy PCS 17, PCS 20 and PCS 23 of the local plan, and also complies with the Houses and Multiple Occupation Supplementary Planning document. The Plan Officer has recommended this fully compliant application for approval today, and I ask you all to fully support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee.
No questions, I'll come to comment.
We might not have any questions. No. Comments?
Yes, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation. This is so much better, isn't it? You know, you can see people having room to breathe, not swing a cat around in, but they can sit down at that table which is indicated, I think it's a table. They can all get together, socialise in a proper communal area, chat to their mates cooking over the road if they are just over there, and it's so much better. I think you probably rather would live here. Not surprised I've had inquiries already. It's a much better configuration. It's one that I am satisfied with, that meets some communal standards for future intended occupiers.
Anybody? Peter?
I was going to only agree with Councillor Hunt.
All right. Anything else? Okay. Those, unless there's anything else, those in favour of the motion to move the officer's recommendations, please indicate. Okay. Against? Abstentions?
Planning permission's granted.
Thank you. Thanks, Julia. Okay. Fitzherbert Spur.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at Unit 14 Fitzherbert Spur up in Farlington for the installation of a 2.4 metre high mesh fence, wire fence, with gates and soft landscaping fronting Hardy Road. So we've got an industrial area up in this part of Farlington. The unit faces onto Fitzherbert Road and it backs onto Hardy Road, but the application site is the frontage onto Hardy Road where they would like to erect a fence. This is a strip, you'll see in a photograph in a minute, of just open grass, open to the road and pavement. The applicant would like to contain that with a fence with a couple of gates at either end, just for normal access reasons, and there'll be a small return. This is a rear access track serving residential rear garages and gardens. There's a few more details of the position of the gates, etc. So it's looking south along the road, so you can see the houses opposite, front gardens, and this open grassed area. The applicants quite reasonably just want to secure that area with a fence, just in terms of keeping people off their property, access, vandalism, anything else. So it's a reasonable request in officer's opinion just to erect a fence along the back of pavement. It came in as a close boarded wooden fence, which we thought was less suitable than a wire mesh fence. I mean, the close boarded fence would weather in and so on, but it's still nevertheless closed visually. And so officers asked if they would consider having a wire mesh fence, one of those ones that has, there we are, just that fine mesh. They're still hard to get over, but you can see through them. So visually, they're just a bit lighter in the street, a bit less solid for neighbours to look at. And indeed, you can see any planting behind it. They have agreed to planting, berberis, other things like that. So a bit of habitat going in and aesthetically pleasant species there. So we've got a landscape condition to that effect. That's the looking south as well. That's the corner into the where the return will be into the access track for the neighbours. I think that's the long and short of it. It's come to committee because we had 6 objections, but otherwise, notwithstanding that, officers felt it was absolutely fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Members, anything? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Simon, so how are people going to, the people who operate this, how are they going to get access into that little strip of land between the fence and that wall?
A couple of gates, if the image comes up, here we are. So a gate there and a gate at the southern end, so they can maintain it, have access to the rear of the property, etc.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? I'm going to move the officer's recommendations.
Yeah, I agree with you. I read the report yesterday properly and saw it today, and I saw that they want to do this because of crime, people coming in there. I wouldn't, and I think the officers have done a good job. Secure this wire mesh fencing, which after a while you hardly notice. Much better than that awful corrugated fencing with the spikes on top that I suppose they could have put there. And these are much harder to get over even than those. And certainly a wooden board fence is quite easy to get over and breaks very readily. So I agree with you and happy to second it and help prevent crime in that location.
Indeed, thank you. Okay, Gerald.
Sorry, I'm going to disagree. Because my experience of people having fences like this is people don't clear out the rubbish that gets thrown over them, and they just gradually build up rubbish after time and time and time. At least with a boarded fence, people who live opposite don't see the rubbish that collects. But with one that is, you can see through, you'll just see the large numbers of plastic bottles, etc., growing over time, and it'll just become a dump. So I think this, I would have happily supported it if you couldn't see through, but because you will be able to see through to the accumulation of rubbish, I won't.
Okay. He makes a good point.
Yeah, no, it's a reasonable point. It's a reasonable point. You're not proposing anything.
Yes, I should propose saying no.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody?
Chairman, I see Mary indicate.
I propose we say yes because the most of what we'll see is green, and it's important to have green in your environment. You know, the rubbish will be less than the green grass.
Chair, I would support Mary's comment. I think actually with the big bushes and things they are proposing, there might be a light dusting of bottles at the bottom, but the overall effect will be positive. And we are actually adding a little bit of biodiversity to the area. And further, I think it doesn't look like a major thoroughfare, and therefore there will be less waste generated, I would hope. Because I was about to commend the planning department for having moved from the board to the mesh.
Okay. Anybody else for anything else? Okay. Well, Councillor Van Jackson, you haven't got a seconder, so we'll plough ahead with moving the officer's recommendation, which is the motion on the table. Those in favour? Against? I think that's it.
Planning permission is granted.
Okay, and thank you. And that concludes today's Planning Committee. Thank you, members. Thank you, officers. I'm closing the meeting at 2:12 p.m. Thank you.